just doesn't seem right. I just think it's the wrong material, you know? Just can't figure it out. I think it's the wrong material. And how would you mount that? How would you do that? I don't know. I don't know.
Boy, you know, sorry,
Jeez, Ted.
sorry about that.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
How are you?
I came in and I just got caught up in what you were doing.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to scare you.
You did. Good job, though.
Sorry. I heard you got another Penton.
I
came over
did.
to take a look at it.
I did. A mid-400.
Wow.
Nice, huh?
Yeah. Boy, you gonna ride this
Oh,
thing?
I don't know. It's going to take a real man to put that between his legs, I'll tell you.
Well, I wish you luck.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to need it.
Hey, the other reason I came over is I wanted to tell you about another one of our video projects we're going to do.
Oh, yeah.
We've got invited by Mr. Penton to come up to his residence, and he's going to show us around the farm and the property and let us videotape it. He's going to, narrate and tell stories and all kinds of neat things like that. So we're going to put together one of our videos based on
Oh, that sounds great. That sounds real good. When is that going to happen?
next weekend. We're
Next
going up there
weekend.
very soon. So
Yeah,
I
good.
just thought I'd come over and share that with you and see the bike.
I appreciate
Didn't
you.
exactly mean to scare you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's kind of a habit anymore.
So,
Well, have a nice time down there and a real safe trip.
Hello, I'm John Penton.
hey, Al.
Morning.
I didn't know everybody was going to be
Hey, when you get done, I still have about half a yard to do. Can you come over and help me finish?
How about my other yards?
In the spring of 2006, John Penton provided us with a rare treat. We were afforded the opportunity to spend a day with him at his home. Throughout this special day, Mr. Penton gave us a guided tour of the Penton family farm, homes, and businesses. Accompanying us were members of the Penton family, as well as original Penton employees and founding members of the Penton Owners Group. Join us now for this very special inside look at where it all began. This is A Day at Home with John Penton.
That Bracebridge Street sign there is the most famous sign of them all.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, that's a historical sign. That Bracebridge Street was the famous street in England that Norton was built. AGS Matchless was all on those streets, and they renovated the city. That sign is about 200 years, over 250 years old.
55.
And,
It took me a little longer. My gas gauge didn't move hardly at
when
all.
they were renovating the city,
Your
we
got
stole-
is cheap out here. We're paying $2.98.
Lavery and I went up and stole it, put it in the back of our Fiat, and went away. No, I guess he had a Peugeot at that time.
Who was that, Mr. Penton?
Chris Lavery. And then we later on the Bobbies saw us, and later on he was fined 140 pounds, and I paid the bill.
But you got the sign.
I got the sign.
There was a video posted about a month ago on one of the message boards, the Moto message board, of a world championship motocross from the 60s. And Jeff Smith was in it,
Yeah,
and Vickers,
Vickers.
and those guys. At the end of it, on the podium, Lavery was somehow on the podium with him.
Oh,
they
yeah,
showed
because-
he was in
because he
Vickers was riding the CZ,
yeah.
and he was involved with the CZ thing, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was mechanic for Vickers.
Yeah. But it was pretty funny because I thought, hey, I know that guy.
Oh yeah.
So it was neat.
What is he gonna take a picture of this mess?
Anything you'd like.
Not that I'd like.
Well,
Well, originally, if you go back to the originally, you know, this was the farm. You're in a briar patch right now. Now I'm going to tell you something very interesting. That garage there sits on an old railroad track. And I saw that old railroad, and I even rode on it as a little kid. Well, it was in an urban track. Went right through that garage, and if you go right up there, that's why this bridge is here. Right here was the lot line to the right here. See this pin? This was the north lot line of the railroad. That pin there. You see? And then it went 60 feet over here. And that was the railroad. It went right through here. And when you go down here, this is something that you should. It's interesting. This bridge that goes here was built in 1898, I think. If you look down here, somewhere. Oh, it isn't visible, but see that 1898? 1899, I think, right there. That's when this bridge was built, in 1898, and this interurban was decommissioned in 1930. So in a period of 30 years, which is longer now than when I started to build the bike, that's all this interurban lasted. Just a period of 30 years. And that's a very interesting thing, you see. And when you start to think about time element and so forth. And this was a farm, and the interurban went through. And our farm went all the way through that road down to 250, down to north 254 down here, see. And North Ridge Road split the farm in half, you see. But this was all briars and big willow trees and this was all a farm ground. And this creek was that way. And then the creek, when they built the new road, the creek was we put the ground underground. And this here, after I wanted to clean up down there, then I put the 54-inch tiles up here. Yeah, I wanted to get rid of it. So that comes down. It comes down through and goes down underneath and all the way down, and that did away with the creek. But in storm time, now that they built a new road and diverted all the state and it diverted everything, this system doesn't handle it all. Sometimes it builds up here and my basement is a little bit higher, and the water will flow over by the garage there, and go down and fill this thing here. This is only on a storm like a Katrina or something. When there's a big storm, only happened twice, and then it goes all the way down. But that is because they diverted water from another stream. The state did that years ago. But this was a lot of work putting this in so it would handle normal set. And if you go up above here, there's a real we did it all ourselves. You couldn't get the state or anybody to help. So we put the tiles in the lake and everything up above. And I'm on the receiving end. And these homes here, this was my home. Then this was Ted's, and that's Ike's. Down there, the brick homes. And this, Ted started to build his first in '56, and Ike built his in '50. And by '56, '58, he had his built, and I started to build my brick home in '60.
And then across the street.
Oh, that's right. We built Mom's brick home across the street. That was built just before mine. But then I started to collect these sandstones. Most of these are well stones. And as you go down through those wells, farther down, that was interesting. You'll see some of them are grooved where the water flowed out, and so forth. And they started to someone gave me one if I would move it away. But they asked me if I would move it away, So I moved it. One thing led to another. now these things go for all the way from $500 to $1,000 in an auction.
Like a lot of areas of the country don't have well stones. What's the purpose actually of these well stones?
Well, basically where they dug the well and then they stoned it up, they had to have a cap, and they capped it, and the older ones, these go back to the 8th and 19th century, you see. And wherever you see the square ones, the roughed out, they go back. And then the turn of the century, then you'll see round holes in them. And they quit. Well, they quit doing that probably around the middle of the 20s.
So in essence, they would actually dip water down through there.
Yeah,
come up.
Pumped water. If we walk down here and look at these, they're interesting because at different years and in different ways. Some I guess I got some down there that even have where they put the wooden cap on them, and they put grouts down, lead grouts down, and held it to put the pump on. But there's all different ones. But the older one, I got the older ones, one of them, the older ones in front. But it was funny that people they wanted to get rid of those things. Are heavy. They wanted to get rid of them, and they were tearing the farmhouses down and so forth, and they were just giving them away. And then I got the idea, and Jack and I, we hold them up. We drilled them, and there's a 2-inch rod that goes down into the concrete there that holds them. And see, as the earth changed or freeze, they started. So I'm going to straighten them all up again. But that's why they're crooked. When we set them, they were crooked, but the ground changed and so forth. So I'm going to straighten the things up some of them stayed straight. But if you look, some of the farmers, the big one I have in front has a real nice drain hole in it. But and so forth. And this
Square ones, round ones,
Yeah.
the holes.
and in 1954 we had an idea, you know, and so we're going to start apartments here. That was the first apartment we built in 54 and it's still there. But none of this land did we sell, you see. I'm trying to find one of these.
Here's a groove.
Yeah, there's a drain groove there. That you see, here's where the puddle was. And there's the drain groove.
What was it used for?
Top of a well, dug well. They dig a well, stone it up. See, remember these ridges were all sand, as you know, and they dig the well and stone it up. You see, and then cap it, put a big stone on top.
You know what I always thought what they were for? I thought they were for grinding wheels,
Yeah,
and they
there is-
were
I have two.
flaws in them or something, and they
I
give
have
them away.
two grindstones here. But I've got there are two grindstones here.
That's what I always thought. They
Oh,
was
yeah.
for a big grist mill, you know,
Yeah.
and they had flaws in them or something, and they didn't use them.
See?
And this
They
one's
said you can't
interesting.
teach an old dog new tricks.
This one's interesting. This was all busted up, and I rebuilt it. And if you notice, you see, I drilled and put rods down through here. You see, and I put a rod through there,
Locating pins. Like a dowel rod.
a dowel rod to
Yeah.
hold it, and then I put it together. And now, and I've been looking for another one down there. Now, I got three on the farm. So I've been thinking about replacing a couple of these because I got two just like this one, real nice ones. Now you see here's where they let it in for a pump. You see, they even got fancy on this one and did that. See.
Very interesting.
But
They have the Cadillac Ranch in Texas, and they have the Wellstone Ranch in Amherst.
but it all started with someone giving me, and then I was able to handle them. And a couple of these I bought. I know. Estrath up here is the demolition guy, and he had 7 of them laying in the woods. You know.
Still does.
Or he collected some more now.
Oh,
He
yeah.
won't sell. He wouldn't sell them for nothing. But I said, hey, Jerry, what are you going to do with those? And I don't know. I said, I'll give you $100 for them. He said, 7 of them. And they were different. Some of these are them. And I said, I'll give you, and he said, give me 125. So I gave him 125 for 7 of them.
That was a good deal.
Yeah. But I had this one here needed patching up too. And so I didn't know, but what I might someday, I won't live long enough to replace it. But this one was busted. No, I think this wasn't busted up. It was shattered up. No, yeah, it was all one piece, I think, but we shattered it. I gotta
Now,
look
is
at
this
it.
this is a grist stone, or is this a Wellstone too?
This was a Wellstone.
Wellstone, okay. It's
Yeah.
got all the
Yours,
curves.
yeah.
Cut right through.
When I go by one, it was a grist stone. I
Oh,
could
here you
show
go. This is the top, actually.
Yeah, this is the top. Oh, here's the drain. See, when the guy got it, and he put a drain. But we'll go up to the front of the house, and that one is that's my prize one. some guy had offered me $2,000-3,000 for that one up there. These people, it's like, it's really interesting. It's really interesting how these old motorcycles, people look for them. But then that was in '54. We built that duplex, and that was the last. Then we changed our mind. We got into motorcycles and so forth, and we wasn't going to go into houses. So, but then because of the nature of Lorraine going down and so forth, we keep all of this through here. And Henry used to have a house there, and he sold it to that therapist. And he's a very renowned therapist. He's got a big therapy shop over in Avon. But at any rate, that over there, believe it or not, then that road stopped Section 8. Okay. And that's why we keep this. That's why I keep the dog houses with no dogs in it. But they work. It really works. It's hard to believe it. And so then I kept everything isolated around here. And I wanted to take the trees out because there's so much. But Donna says we got to have the trees there. So we can't have the apple trees yet. But that used to be orchard, even back when you can remember that was all orchard. See?
Well, I think in this picture here,
the place is called Penton Orchard.
Dane, this picture you were taking with you, the top picture. Now that's probably when this orchard was more mature.
Oh yeah,
there was full-on orchard.
That was full-on orchard.
Right.
Oh yeah, that was full-on orchard. Yeah.
Yeah, I picked all them apples in '67 when he was on strike that year.
That's right.
Them all
Sure.
myself and that fall.
Sure. But the reason, and so this way it keeps us, and we have no trouble with our neighbors across here in the street, over there, over that neighbor over there, all across there. See, they don't bother us, and so forth. So it really isolates it. Say this little home I own, and the neighbor. This is
There's a whole story about the little home. You're pointing at it, but actually it's the first home you built. Why don't you tell them a little bit about that?
Yeah, that little white house is the first house I built in '50. It was a Aladdin home. There was a company in Michigan, and it was a prefab.
Yeah.
And we laid the block up and put the house up. That was the first home that I built, and that was when I had Catherine. And let's see, these kids were born. Yeah, they were all born in that home.
Is that right?
That house. And then when Catherine died, and so forth. Well, then right where my home was, is an old house that Ted lived in, and that was a granary that had been moved in the 1918 or something like that. Or yeah, 1918. It was moved up to there and built into a home. So I tore that down when Ted built his place and built that thing there, so that it kept the whole family right here. Now it's interesting. Now that I stand here, the second home there where Ted lived, now Mabel just died, and Ms. Barbara Penton is going to live there. We'll still have Pentons in all the homes.
And then the next house over is Jeff's, so Jeff is close to you.
Yeah.
And then back over here now, on the other side of this building here, that was your motorcycle shop. That was your second shop.
Yeah.
Penton Honda.
Yeah, that was the second one. And when they moved out, then I had built this pole barn. So when I have a easement a lifetime easement on 50% of that on that side. You see, and then I have all of this here is eased off. There's an easement and permanent right-of-way easement through all the way up to the other road. If something ever happens to me or whoever gets this property, they have it's private property, but the permanent easement all the way through to the other road and so forth, and also a permanent easement all the way down the other side and out through the motorcycle thing. I didn't want to get trapped in during my lifetime. Right. What happens from then on, but the easements are there and registered in the whole 9 yards, so forth. So all the way through this property here, all the way through here is a 30-foot easement. So that it could even be turned into a public if you wanted to.
How long has this building's been here?
That has been there. Oh, that was there ever since you've known us, haven't you?
Probably.
Oh yeah.
I just...
This was all my mother's property, right down to the schoolhouse on the corner. And Mom sold this to the gas company, whether they wanted it or not. She had to sell it to them.
So they probably did it in the 30s or 40s.
They did. That was put in 50. Oh, yeah. That. Oh yeah. That was put in. That was put in the early 40s. Yeah, it was put in the early 40s because when they came to the original line was put in the 20s, the old line. When they put the new line, the second line in, there's a main. It goes all the way to the National to the U.S. Kobe, U.S. Steel down there, and then in '54 they put the last main in.
Okay.
But this was here then. So there's easements all the way through. See, and that's why I had that drop in the stream. There was a big argument about that. Yeah, I ordered to get everybody off my property. Got the sheriff out here and everything because I was ready to make the pour over there, over the gas line. They said you can't do this. I had the concrete trucks here and everything. They said all the concrete trucks are here. They said you can't do it. And the gas, they must have had 5 or 6 executives from the gas company, and I got the sheriff, and the sheriff says you're trespassing on his property. Get out of here. And I poured my pour, and the gas line is still there.
Didn't even have to get the gun out, huh?
Oh, that was a big deal. See, they don't know, and that's been forgotten. They don't know it there. They'd be down there tearing things apart, so I just don't tell them about it. But the rest of them, you know, this gas business, I must be with this gas business so long. It got so bad in the Depression, we were making cider. We always had to wash the cider jugs, you know, and we needed hot water and everything. Well, on my father's got, Ted's got all kinds of ideas. So we used to come down and tap the high pressure line with the water tank. At that time they only carried 150, 200 pounds. And we'd tap it with the water tank, fill the gas, and we'd take the water tank up and heat our water for our washing our cider jugs. And we did everything to stay alive. And it was good for us.
What's the story on the tower up by the house up here?
Oh gosh, yeah, I gotta take you up there, I guess. My goodness gracious. That tower, you can ask the kids. At 5:30, that bell, I had a telephone pole there, you see? And that telephone pole had a bell. and the bell came. Let's see, the bell came from the Middle Ridge School up here, and Haslage and I come up here, and so
I got a
forth.
question for you, John.
Yes.
How come that tower's leaning?
That tower.
Supposed to be leaning?
That tower, I don't think is leaning. It
Oh,
might
yeah.
be. It might be, but I don't think so.
Sure it is.
Is it? Well, it was originally straight. This is a. It could be, maybe.
It's settling. This side's coming up or something.
Yeah, it could be, maybe. You see, but at any rate,
Tower piece of leaning tower.
at any rate, Jack will tell you. At 5:30, this bell rang, and it was supper time, and you could hear it all over the neighborhood, you know, and so forth, and it was sitting on a telephone pole. So the telephone pole, Mom thought it was ugly, and Jigs thought it was ugly. That was Jiggalati. So what he did, he said, I got an idea. I'll build you a bell tower. You see? So then he built the bell tower, see? And if you were on Middle Ridge Road, you'd hear that.
Yeah, you're waking everyone in the neighborhood up.
So now we don't have the ugly telephone pole anymore.
The trouble is, you just made Jack hungry.
Yeah.
Well, and you got to tell him about the copper top on this thing too, how that come about. George Slater,
Yeah.
that was a big project there.
Yeah, and I screwed up in a way, but I don't know, somehow, and I never finished this. But there's supposed to be, if you notice the pins in here, and then, but if you wonder why that's so meticulous, and this is even bird proof up on the top, you've got to, if you have one of these, you've got to have it bird proof. Otherwise, forget it. And I never finished it. So that I put that there to make sure the birds didn't get in it. But the bell.
Yeah, Go pat the neighbor up and he's going fishing now.
That bell tower. That bell tower is all copper. And some guy came along from down there and he said, I know what you can do. I got some material you can play on there. It'll always stay copper. Don't believe it. So someday I'll probably have to get up there and polish it. But that is a solid copper. You see? Oh, and I know, he said it'll always stay copper and it won't turn green. You see? Well, believe it or not, you can see it. It looks like it. Hell no.
Now I can remember Jack Lato living in this house a number of years ago.
Oh, Lato lived there, and about everybody lived in all these duplexes and houses here, and in Ike's house. Lato lived in Ike's house too, when he moved and so forth. But this was the first. This was the first when I was married in '49. That's when he started to build that. And yeah, you were all Jeff.
Yeah, we have pictures. Actually, this house during the era that you had Husqvarna, there was an awful lot of really, really now famous people came through there, because when they came to stay, they'd stay next door in a little house, and Torsten Hallman and Roger DeCoster and the whole clan of people that would come here for the real early interims. When they were around this area working on their bikes, they stayed in a little house here. So we wake up in the morning and you don't know who might be next door, but it was usually somebody that you read about in a magazine or see at the races.
Yeah, but this Go ahead.
Before I forget, you mentioned your mom owned to the schoolhouse.
Yeah.
All right, what was the schoolhouse? I don't remember.
That's the flower shop now.
The Stone Villa?
Stone Villa.
That was the
That was
the
his,
school?
oh sure.
See,
Stone Villa.
I didn't know that, I don't think.
You didn't know that?
I don't think so.
Oh yeah, the Stone Villa. The Stone Villa was the schoolhouse.
I used to eat in there all the time.
Is that right?
Well, when I stayed over here, yeah.
Oh,
Every time
that's
I wanted to steak.
sure, that's right. And before it was the schoolhouse, when my father, it was in 22, they closed it. No,
Later than that.
it was later than that because Ike went to school there for a year or two. You see, and then they closed it. And then when they closed it, then they made a gas station out of it. And Kobe bought it up here, and then the gas station roof caught fire, and it burned, and so forth. And then Sam Ross had a tavern in Lorraine. He bought it, made the Stone Villa. You see, so it was originally the school, and this property went right down to the school property. And when Ross built it, then he built a Sunoco station behind it. And
Yeah,
Jerry Ross ran that Sunoco station, but but it was interesting. In the back, she owned down to the schoolhouse, but that big White House there had been bought away from the Miller farm that my folks bought from.
Okay, did Miller's own that little gas station that used to be across on the corner?
No, that was
What's his name?
Beatlers.
Beatlers?
Yeah. So forth. But
I know where I got the Miller. Buddy Miller used to have his race car there.
Yeah,
all the
that's
time.
right,
The
yeah.
yellow 44.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Yep.
this is probably one of the pride. This stone came from a wealthy family home, up here. And I put it so that you could see the water drain in the front. You see? See, here was the water drain. But that was, that's a heavy stone there. I had to get a bigger high lift to move that. The rest of them, my little backhoe would have. This one wouldn't.
That one weighed about 9,000.
I don't know. I know that it weighs.
That's a
That you're about 9,000. Yeah. I would say 8 or 9,000. You're pretty close there because I could lift. Yeah, that's.
Now, there's a number of pictures with you on beside your NSU, and with Mrs. Penton and your sons and all with
They
you.
were taken right over there. And let's see, what was.
There was a big weeping willow, but that's not the willow there. It's a different willow.
No, there was a weeping willow right here, and that.
Where that birch is, or back?
Yeah, just about where the birch is. I think they planted it right about where the birch was.
So a lot of those
And I
historic
think
photos were
We
taken.
may have been sitting on that stone there, or on that abutment there. And that picture, I was thinking about putting on a plaque down in Daytona, but I don't know. I want to put a plaque in Daytona for the family, for Jack, for all the family. And I don't know, but you see, the interesting part about it, our neighbors don't bother us. You see, and that's important when you when you live in an area. We've kept it, and we haven't built it into something, a monument here or a big statue house. We're happy just the way it is.
Now, this here photo on the cover with Jack on the bike here. Now, that was actually taken somewhere down in here, wasn't it? Down beside your house before this was filled
Hey,
in?
Jack, come here once. Where do you think this was taken then?
right exactly by the old railroad bridge, right next to it.
That's one of the early pictures on literature, Penton literature.
Yeah, that's the first piece of literature that we made of him. But yeah, the bridge is actually right here.
Okay.
Right next
That's before it was filled in.
Yeah, you can still see the creek in the background.
You see? But I want to, we'll go this way and I'll show you. It's going to be interesting when you get this way. This was, even in Jack's time, he can remember this was all down in there, willows and the whole 9 yards. It was a...
Yeah, we got to play in the creek. Play in.
Now we're going to cross the street here. You can't see this, but you can imagine. You can imagine how deep it is. It's about a little over 15 feet down there. As you see, and a great big. This used to be a creek through here, and a great big, but we couldn't handle it and everything, so we put 54-inch tile leads up here and so forth, and it comes down through here. This is, and we did this all ourselves because the state, nobody would help us when they diverted the Route 2. They diverted the road down. They didn't help us at all. They could have written it down to a different stream, and the state wouldn't do anything. So we actually built everything ourselves, because as we progressed down to the shop, this was flooding the shop in the whole 9 yards. So that's why we constructed this whole thing. And interesting, the tile comes from here, but what you're standing on here is when you have a torrential rain. We've only had 2 or 3 of them. We have an overflow, and the water comes down here and hits here, and there's so much water coming up there, and now you're under pressure, forcing it out there, that I can't handle it down at the other bridge. But I have 2 sandbags down by my garage door, and by putting those sandbags there, I'm safe to go over by my garage and on down through there. I had to, and it was just a accumulation of everything, and kept building and building. But now we can handle it, even if you. We only had 2 times. Remember one time?
69, 4th of July.
Yeah.
I remember that. When I was living over there, I was working midnights. And I had to take about 4 different roads to get home, because the roads were flooded that morning. The next morning, I parked my little Mustang over there. We always parked it by the dam. I went up, took a little nap, and when I got up and looked out the window, the water was coming over the dam about that deep. The whole thing, it was all coming down there where the overflow was over there. I went down and I waded water about that deep to get to my Mustang, and I took it up by the fruit market. I remember that.
But we can handle that now with this overflow here and so forth. We can handle it. But I think we ought to go up the street, and they can shoot the front of those houses.
Be sure and tell them about the
Amherst and so forth. And I said, I always want an arch bridge. So I had Ollie, who was in our club, Ollie Martin, in our club. I had him build that down there. You can see. Maybe you want to step across the road and see it. But that cornerstone has Ollie, and that white cornerstone has Ollie and Martin and Ella Martin on it. But that's why it's there. And the bridge beyond that, Jack and Jeej gave to us before I built the bridge. because the kids always played there. So forth. Now you wonder why we don't go to Florida? We stay here. Let's go. And no, I got what I do all the time there. And then see, I come, well, we'll walk up here.
Looks like you're drinking a beer.
At 8 o'clock in the morning.
I just heard a bell.
You see, and I own right up to that. Oh, that big oak tree is my favorite.
Oh, it's beautiful.
That big oak tree, just on the other side of that oak tree is my lot line. Nobody's going to touch that oak. I'm so proud of that thing, you cannot believe it.
Is it true? Is it true that was planted when Alborn was 10?
No, but it's well way over 100 years old, because we used to, the kids, we used to swing on that.
Is that right?
And so forth. It just seems to me that it was about that size when we were swinging on it.
Beautiful tree.
And so forth. And so the whole thing is, and I had to give them, that gas company, that I was eminent domain again, and so forth, and arguments and so forth. And you know what? I have to know it. I have to do everything. Otherwise, you can walk it. So, but the whole thing is around independence or privacy. You see, I mow that field. And so forth, but I'm not going to, I just do mow it with my bush hog.
Now, your family homestead, the original house, was right over here?
The original house sat right in the middle of that lawn there.
Right in the middle of this lawn?
Right in the middle of that lawn.
So from here you can see your house that you grew up in, and then just behind you, as you turn along the road, your home and your brother's home. It's all one area.
Yeah.
And then the farm market right here.
The farm market was built here, but that was built, there was a big barn here, so forth. Big barn and so forth. Then the farm market was built here, you see. And Bill built the farm market and truck garden in the back, you see, and so forth. And then later on, things got the truck garden, so then he turned to stand into going to market, going into the terminal, and marketing. And they still do that, and you can't believe they have a business that's very unique foods and so forth, person, everything. It's really neat and so forth. But that, it was interesting when this big old farmhouse was here, and I had Donna and I had the 7 kids, and yet, now that would go back to Jack. Hey Jack, come here a while. That would go back to, what year would were you kids all living in that big farmhouse? 59. And then that was the one where I was born in and everything. And then while they were living there, Mom and Bill had just moved into that, right? Sure.
Yes, had just moved. Because they lived in the old farmhouse even when Grandma was in the new house.
Oh, that's right.
And then they moved in with Grandma a little bit later, and that's when this house became available. And we moved out of the old granary down here for just the year that it took, or a year and a half it took to build the house.
We had 7 of us. Yeah, Tim was born in that old granary house.
Yes, he was. He was
You
just
can't
born.
believe it. I don't even want to think about it. All of them. We had all the kids, 6 of them, upstairs in just a thing like this. And they had a curtain between the girls and the boys.
And it was fun though. The house was not real terribly stable, so when a big thunderstorm would come, the house would actually, we felt, maybe it's because we were kids, we thought that it would actually rock, you know, but it was, we were upstairs in the attic. Well, we loved it that way. It was just it was like camping out every night, you know, everybody go upstairs.
There's Barb, I don't know, she can remember that. Sure. You can remember living in the old farmhouse, didn't you?
Yes.
Upstairs,
Yeah.
when you had a curtain.
Yeah, you had the little stairway you went up, and it split off, didn't it?
Yeah.
Just like the old farmhouse here.
Oh yeah.
Well, this farmhouse was great. By the time we moved in here, the windows were the original windows, and in the wintertime, when the wind would blow out of the north here, we were upstairs and there wasn't actually any heat. And so you wake up in the morning and there'd be big runners of snow across the floor where it came in the window and blew across the floor because it was actually below freezing in the room.
This is true.
So
You ran downstairs.
So you jump up, you run downstairs, and you stand over the heater because there's a grate on the floor. And all the kids would be down there on the floor, warming up downstairs.
You're lucky you had a heater. We had an old Burnside stove. We put our shoes by it at night.
Yeah.
Run upstairs, cover up, had a straw mattress, sink down in that thing.
It was actually real cozy. But boy, you didn't get up for anything except to leave.
When you'd wake up, it would be snow on the windowsill, sometimes a little bit over on the quilt, big old thick homemade quilts.
Yeah.
I know all about it.
See, we got raised like
What about it?
the old times.
Today they would think different, but it worked. It worked. But this,
Oh yeah.
so far. Wait till you get to this machine shop. You ought to see. You remember where PVL was up there. You know. Now you got to go down this way and see where PVL is now. And we're pretty happy about it. Barbara and Dane. This is their operation. It works very nicely. You know. You're gonna follow me, or I'm gonna follow you.
Everywhere.
Talk to them about the house.
Oh,
Where did that come
years ago.
come into play? What?
That
When
little
was that
house
built?
was built. Ike and I built this house, or Ike and Ked. Now I built the house in 1954, or no, 52 I think. But if you stand down here, then we can show you. It's kind of embarrassing to tell you that originally that was an old chicken coop right there. That was an old chicken coop, and we turned it into Penton Brothers motorcycles, that red barn there. And then later on, when we were really going to really going to go into business in 1951, I think. We built the end on it. Down there, and then that was our motorcycle shop. And in 49, about the same time, then we built this on, you see, and so forth. And then after we built this on, where are you? After we built this on, you see, then Ike and Alice got married in 51, I think, and we had to have a place for them to live. And so Ted and Ike and I built this little bungalow, or this little place here, which is still, Gunver still leases it once in a while. But this valley used to flood. And I've seen this valley, before we fixed it, I've seen this valley fill here and go over the road. And that's when we had to do something. We had to rebuild it, you see? And so we built this dike here, and there's a lake up there, you see? And we're going to walk up there and show you that part of it too.
Has this been raised up higher, or that dike is
No.
It's the same height it's always been.
I think we'll walk up there so you. Well, I'm standing right on, because there was only a driveway between our building and a creek, right here, right where I'm standing, and we had to have more room, number one, but number two, we had to do something with the creek, because Brother Bill wanted water for irrigation, you see. So in the process of it all, we dug out there and we moved ground in here, and we didn't have big excavators or anything else. I forget, I think Plum helped us, Claude Plum helped us. And so we then built this, if you want to call it, dike right here. And we were still in the motorcycle thing here and so forth, and I had to show somebody, you know, how my bike would work, and I gave her a little bit too much shot, and I ended up in the pond on the other side. You see? And it wasn't too funny at the time, I can tell you that. But I shut it off in time that when I went over, I didn't end up in the middle of the pond. I ended up in the banks of the pond, so forth.
Which bike was that? You remember?
No, it was, I don't know which, and I can't remember. I'd have to go back and find some old pictures or something. Somebody took a picture of it. But this was our water control now.
Beautiful.
You see? But believe it or not, with all the pressure and everything, it's still, this will not handle the water that comes down here. And that's why I have the overflow to take it over there. And that does handle it. But it's a real...
Okay, which ones the kids used to go through that, come out
Oh,
there, Jack?
that's terrible. We don't even talk about that. But they did.
I know,
in
it's
flood time. And you know, and it scared you to death. Because those
I look out my window and watch them. That's how I knew about it.
you see. But we finally learned how to control this. But then, you see, and the farm goes all the way back to the new road. And then that building down there, the little building, everything burned down. And in 40 and let's see, 39 when it burnt. Then we had some old carpenters build the shop up again, and it was built all out of used timbers, out of lumber out of Cleveland. We hauled it in the old Model A Ford and build it, and then we built around it. When we get inside, I'll show you how it was built. But
This was
In the winter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I remember
And
one
we used
time,
to slide down.
it was probably in '69. Gunnar Lindstrom was here on Sunday. He was ice skating. That thing was just as smooth as a tabletop.
We played a lot of hockey out here.
You guys were doing hockey, and then we ended up getting bikes on there. I used to come off of the bank up there, about that spot right there in the opening. Fast as I could come on that 90, and once I got off on the ice, I just set my feet and cut the handlebars and go around 8 times and back up against the bank there. We'd have a ball.
Yeah.
But I couldn't ice skate. I tried that, and my ankles just would not hold me up. They'd go down again. Gunnar was here that one Sunday. It seemed like somebody else. It seemed like it was 2 of them. You and Jeff and Tom.
Yeah, because we would always take and clean the pond off, and I mean, this was the place. All the neighbor kids would all come over, and we'd have hockey games here. Then we go down to the old shop down here, and we have a little furnace in there, and you go in there and get warmed up, and then come walking back up.
Well, that particular day I remember so well. That was the smoothest I ever seen that ice. It was,
If you would get the snow off of it, a little bit of sun would, like a Zamboni during the day, and then we had a lot of fun out here.
I can tell you another little story about this place up here. That was in '70 because I had that red Penton in. This guy I worked with, him and his wife had separated, and he was kind of going through a hard time. So I told him one evening, I said, just go home with me, John, and we'll go have a steak, a couple of drinks or something. And it's okay. So we come home, he said, I want to see you ride that motorcycle. And that's the way he talked. So I was up in there was still some apple trees over in there then. And I was spinning donuts, and then I did a few wheelies, and it got away from me. Hung that thing right in an apple tree. I fell off the back, front wheel was hanging in the limbs. John was so laughing he fell down on the ground. He went back. Everybody at the Ford plant knew about it the next day, about me hanging my bike in the tree.
the stuntman.
Your dad went to 6 days once. He kept his Duro BMW down here, and this story is kind of famous. But Jeff and I decided we were going to ride it, so we took it out and we got it started. You know, both of us held it up and we got it started. But in between the 2 barns down there was a very nice hill that went up, and those pine trees weren't there. And Jeff rode around the parking lot a little bit, but he's kind of a daredevil. And he took that BMW, and he was just, I can't imagine, he was maybe 12 years old or something. He was little. And he went between the barns, and he went up that hill a couple of times, and he could make it, so he figured that all out. And then he turned around and come back down the other lane. Well, he got real brave, and he jumped that BMW up over the road that was up over there. And here he was, 12 years old, up on this big old BMW single. You know, I mean, heck, he was only about 4 foot tall anyways. And he jumped that thing over the road, and then he'd bring it back down and around.
Truth's coming out, John.
There you go.
It's
I
too
didn't
late,
know
too
any
late
of
to
that's
whippers
going
now.
on.
That guy I was telling you about that came out here with me that time, he used to tell them guys who worked about that, you know. And then he died like in probably 92 or 3, something like that. I went to the funeral home. He had 2 sons. I had met the one, but the other one was an FBI agent. He used to guard the president. And when I was at the funeral home, I didn't see him. I asked somebody, I said, where's he at? You know, I'd like to meet him. Didn't see. So I hung around there for an hour or more, and I had to come home. You know, I looked over here, and that was over in Parma. And I was walking out the door, and this guy comes out of the restroom, and he looks at me, and he walks over, and he said, you must be Al Bourne. I said, well, yeah, who are you? He said, well, I'm John Smotter Jr. I said, how'd you know that was me? And he said, I've heard your dad tell so many stories, I knew they had to be. And he was right. I was shocked. Couldn't believe it.
But this, you can see a lot of it right up here. Of course, the terrain has all changed. There was apple trees way back there, and so forth. I don't think the pole barn was here. When did Bill build the pole barn?
No, the old barn, the old shed.
The old shed was there. Yeah.
When I lived here, because I know that's where we parked the old Honda when it burned up out there and brought it back at the time.
So forth.
And he used to have a big holding water tank up there. He pumped the water up there and then let it into his sprayer.
Yeah, that holding
Sitting
water
right over
tank is still behind those trees.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I knew it was right over there somewhere.
Yeah. And the fuel tank is behind the trees too.
That
You know, I was telling Dane, or no, I was telling you, I probably lived in more of these houses than most everybody, because I started out in a little white house when I was born, and then when Mom died, I went to live with Uncle Ike and Aunt Alice in the little apartment because their house hadn't been built.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
When they built the house, I went and lived at that house, and then when we got remarried, moved into the little grain house.
That's
and
right.
then back over to the farmhouse, and then back to the new house. So I've lived in almost all the houses here.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you another little story while we're up here. We went somewhere one time, it was in the dead of winter, to a hare scramble. This was probably 69, I'd say, 68 or 69. We came home, unloaded the bikes, and I just went up into the apartment. For some reason, I would always come out and look out the front window over here. And when I looked out, John's mother was starting down over the pond here. She already had ice freezing on her. She'd fell in the pond. She was feeding ducks or something, and she was going to cross, and she fell through. And Jeff was down there, and I yelled at him, and we picked her up. One arm, I had one arm, he had the other, and we took her to the house. She had icicles all over from about here down, from where she fell in the pond. She had to have been in her 70s then. Yeah. I was telling Jack she used to wait on me when I'd come home from work. Every morning, we'd sit up there on the steps and talk for sometimes a half hour, 45 minutes, just yak.
That was some of my greatest memories. Grandma was coming in for lunch when you worked out on the farm, and she'd cook us fried green tomatoes. And tomato soup, and she just crush the tomatoes up, and make the soup or anything. It was always something off the farm that she just would whip up in 5 minutes. She was really, really a good cook.
Yeah, a lot of memories.
You're a farmer.
Well, that's where I was brought up, in the farm. This whole area, but the terrain is all different. But we did truck gardening, and we marketed. Most of our marketing was done in Lakewood, and on Tuesday and Thursday, and on Saturday we would drive to a Lakewood market, farm market, and market our produce in the summertime and fall, and so forth. And one of our main products was apples and apple cider. But we also had truck gardening too, tomatoes and so forth when they were. But our biggest product was the apples and the cider, and we were specialists in that area, and so forth. And even my mother, even after my father died, and my brothers took over, we were still marketing in Lakewood from here every morning. And my mother, even up into the 50s, was going into market yet. So that was our origin, was originally. But the other interesting thing was that my brother Ike, my father had a motorcycle that he rode to college back in 1914 Harley. And when he started farming here, then he parked it in a garage or in a barn down here. And when Ike was old enough, he got it together and got it running. And he was the one that started us really again in motorcycle. My father had passed away, and it was long after that, when I was still monkeying with motorcycles, that my mother would say, if he hadn't gotten that damn motorcycle out, you guys wouldn't have, my children wouldn't be on motorcycling. But the end of the story was that we were taking her, and she was interested in the world. She always had the National Geographic. She had them piled high, but we were able to take her to Europe with us, and she could enjoy that when we were going to the 6 days and so forth. So, and when I went to school at BMW, we were able to take her, and she got to visit Europe. So it turned out just the opposite. It's a good thing that Ike got that damn motorcycle out, because that started us into motorcycling again. And so forth. But that's the way that story went, and that was our origin, was really the farm. That's and that's where Dane's origin was, from the farm too.
Well, yeah, I came from the other side of the county, basically on the west side of the county, and my mother, Uncle John's brother, actually her sister, met my dad at a dance in the country. Basically, she became a teacher out in a little township out south of where we live now, and my dad met her at a dance out there, and ended up courting her, and
they were potato farmers.
Yeah. So that's how the two families got together. So
Mr. Penton dancing?
my dad and my mother were at this dance. That's how they got to meet one another. So
so that's where we come from.
Huh. Huh.
That squirrel's wondering what's going on.
Yeah.
Mr. Penton,
Yes.
could you tell us about how you came to know Doug Wilford? Could you guys go ahead?
How did I come to know you? I don't know. I forget. I can't.
The first time, I think, was in court.
Oh yeah.
When I
Well, that Corey story goes on and on. That's too long a story. But right up from us is a large sandstone quarry, and we always swam in there. There's an interesting thing about that. There's times that I've seen as high as maybe 50 guys up there swimming. We never had swimming suits. It would be totally against the law, and we'd all be in jail. But for years we swam up there without swimming suits, way on up into the 50s, and so forth. And a lot of the neighbors would hang around here, and guys from Amherst and so forth would come down. But I think that's where I met you. Was in the East Quarries, or
Well,
there were several quarries around.
yeah,
But
out on North Lake Street,
yeah.
there was a ground level quarry, and you had to walk back this lane about a quarter of a mile. And me and a couple of friends were walking down this lane, and we hear this motorcycle coming, and we look.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And there's a bridge there. Well, what was left of a bridge was just maybe a beam about 12 inches wide and about 30 foot long. And so we're about to cross that bridge, and this motorcycle guy goes, out of the way, so we back off, and here's the two guys on a Harley go bump, brrr, across the log and up to the quarry, and I go, who in the world, stupid enough, crazy enough to ride this motorcycle double across a log, I was about 13 years old maybe, and here was John and his brother riding double going to the quarry to go swimming, so by the time we get up there, naturally everybody's in the water swimming around, That was my first inclination of cross-country riding on a motorcycle.
Well, I was kind of, I was known all over Lorraine because this quarry up here had about a 50-foot, a little over a 50, I guess a 50 or 60-foot ledge, and that was the peak. What we call, well, the peak was you dive off the peak, then the grass you could run, you can run and run off the grass, and it was about 56 feet up, and that was my pet. Everyone from Lorraine knew Penton from running off the grass.
That went on to generations too, because I remember as kids working over here when we were young, working for Uncle Bill. When it became noon, buddy, we'd be out the back of the farm and over to the quarry, swim till 12:30, then run back and eat lunch, and then back to work at 1 o'clock again. So,
but it was a life that people can't have today. It was, it's just,
we were all spring, clear, clean, nice, just perfect swimming. A little cool in the spring, but East Quarry warmed up, but there's a quarry right across the street from where KTM is now that we called Miller's Quarry. And it was 3 walled, and the sun never got to that quarry, and that thing stayed cold even in the middle of summer. And all the kids, my kids even, Dane's dad would come into town and we'd jump in the back of this pickup truck and go out to the farm and pick beans. On the way home we'd say, drop us here, so instead of coming all the way into town, everybody unloaded and went to Miller's Quarry and went for a swim.
But this I'm really proud of this whole area because it's kind of in an area like Pentonville, because you can stand right here and look. It's built all the way around. It's residents all the way around, with the exception of the cemetery. So we have a little plot in a piece of ground, and if you stand up here, you can see it's a long ways across to those apartments, which are Section 8s. So actually, it's a nice setting here.
What was the original acreage? 47? 56? 47?
These were divided up in that way.
I gotta see all this tile. I haven't been in it since it was
See it from here. I know it sounds funny, but this was the chicken coop. You follow me?
the left side of the building,
The left side of the building.
flat roof area.
And then in '49, when I made the deal to handle BSAs, and we started the business right in there, and so forth. And then we decided it was going to be a business, Only thing, we started with 2 BSAs, So then was when we built this area on here, and I was in there until and we had that as our motorcycle shop until 1962. We moved it from here. Over to the new one over across the way, and so forth. And then at that time, the boys Ted and Ike were in the machine shop business right here. You see, and we're going to go into that machine shop.
How did the machine shop business come about to begin with?
It was through Nordson. That was when the war came along, and they U.S. Automatic, and they were looking for people, and we got some. Ike and Ted got some equipment from the Clearview School. It was old war shipping equipment.
That
And
little hard-edged turret.
that little Harding's turret lathe and so forth, and they were able to make caps for bombs or for something, and so they made caps and they made other things for the Western U.S. automatic.
Okay.
And then one thing led to another, and then Ted got an idea because he had worked in the shipyard to getting that big Hendy. Maybe you can remember that.
Lodge and Shipley.
Lodge and Shipley,
yeah.
And so forth, and one thing gravitated into another, and then and that's how the machine shop became that. But that wasn't enough work, and that's when Ted and I went into the ditch digging business. And we were ditch digging and trucking for a while.
Oh, okay.
We did anything to make a living, and so forth, and then the motorcycle, and we kept the motorcycle thing going.
Well, and the motorcycle business or the machine shop helped foster the motorcycle business because
and so forth.
Yeah.
So it worked out. But
well, when I was getting towards the end of high school, I was thinking about a summer job besides working on the farm, and I actually put in an application down at the steel mill. I don't know if you even knew that. I put an because Lou Murphy worked, worked at the mill, and I thought, well, that might be a way to get in there. So I put in an application down there, and it wasn't too long after that. That's when Uncle Ted asked me if I wanted to go to work down here.
Oh, is that right?
And I can't even remember. I always in high school I was in all these shop classes and stuff like that, and I always liked making stuff with the lathes and so forth. So I thought, hey, that might be a great idea. So that was what kind of got me going to actually working in here.
What is interesting about this was the old shop, and it was after Bill died, it was abandoned in a way, and it was a totally big mess. And I think it took about 2 years. Jack came in and refurnished this whole thing, and it was so bad that you've covered it up. All of these old timbers came from the original shop. Was built with used timbers from old factories that goes back into the 19th century, and they were all black and everything. But Jack painted them all up and so forth. And Jack rebuilt this whole thing because it was nothing but a rundown mess and so forth.
Scooped all the junk out of it, but it turns over nice. As far as I know, it's this close. Somebody that knew what they were doing, rig up a fuel supply to it.
It'd be something to hear that far.
But the interesting part about after KTM needed more room, and they asked us to move, and we looked at other buildings and so forth, and finally it came down to the fact that we thought we could move, or Dane thought, and Barb, that they could move in here. And believe it or not, they're in here, and it seems to be working nicely. And he laid out a plot, and if you go through here, it all works, and doesn't it, Barb?
Oh yeah.
And so forth, and I think you've met Barbara, haven't you?
Yes.
We should go through the evolution, because this particular building, and especially this part of the building, was, it was the beginning of the everything. I mean, this was Grandpa's workshop. I don't know the real early history. Dad can tell that, but I mean, from the beginning, and to start with the brothers and the Penton brothers, it was started here. So I mean, we're actually standing where Uncle Ted and Uncle Ike and Dad and everybody that was involved before the motorcycles did their tinkering, and then when they started with their first motorcycle, and then of course their businesses began here. All of the businesses that evolved into Penton Brothers and later on Penton Imports, really they started all their businesses right here. And this small addition right here was added on when they started to do heavy equipment repair and welding. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was the beginning of the company, Penton Brothers Inc. And there was a very small office right over here in the corner. And I remember it as a very, very small boy coming in and working on the machinery here. Uncle Ted taught us how to run the machinery when we were very young.
When we were real little kids, we used to coast down the hill behind Grandma's house, and when we used to get cold enough, we'd come inside here, and there was one of those little ceramic gas heaters that we used to come in here and get warmed up to get comfortable again.
For our generation, I mean, I've got pictures when I'm 2 and 3 years old in this area, riding my tricycle and things. I mean, this is where we grew up. The next generation grew up, but it's where they started their businesses, and they were here working, and we were around. The kids, today you don't go to work with your dad or your uncles, but I mean, we lived here, we worked here, they were here. So all of my memories of all my early childhood, all of my childhood is all in this area, but a lot of it has to do with actually this building and the building next door, the first motorcycle store, when they had the chicken coop, and that was kind of more of a club than a business. But then when he added on to the front and they had BMW, that was serious stuff. It was a new motorcycle store at that time. And, but I like this building because this represents when they actually started working and they started their own enterprises, and they were all working together. Everybody was here. It was a pretty special time back then.
Much of the machinery that's in here now was here then.
Oh yeah. We take them around and show them.
One of the pieces of machinery that they first bought was World War II surplus. Is in the exact same place it was when I started working here in 1970. I moved it back into the same corner.
The screw machine, and I laugh because he moves it in here, but I remember sitting hours on end sitting there in front of the screw machine, we called it, because you could repeatedly make pieces, and that's how we learned to work with machinery when I was real young. And it was considerably different. It was much darker in here. We've lightened it up, done a lot of nice things like that, but you'd sit in a little dark corner, machining pieces for Uncle Ted and selling them to whomever.
Those were being made for the Korean War. Yeah.
If you don't mind my just making a comment, maybe many people would kind of see you guys as pretty glamorous. You hear Jack make a comment like sitting in a little dark corner and doing that kind of work, maybe just...
Back then, we grew up on a farm, and we were laughing a minute ago because he grew up on a farm, we grew up on a farm, and we didn't have a lot of money. I mean, we derived our food from the farm and a few pennies here and there, and we had one pair of shoes when we grew up. Where we are today and where we were then are considerably different times, and we had to work. They worked very, very hard for a living, and they taught us that if you wanted to make $1 or $2, you had to sit down and get to work. So that doesn't seem unusual at all for me. All of us have learned how to work through our lives.
In this building, I mean, it as Uncle John mentioned, the fact that it's now nice and bright in here. Well, back then there was no drywall on the ceilings or on the walls. It was just a stud wall structure. And there was a couple of heaters in here to keep it warm, and you put light where you needed it. You didn't try to light the whole building up. So I mean, I can remember what Jack's talking about. There was a fluorescent light over the machine, and that was all that there was. And you didn't need any more than that. It wasn't. So now it's pretty bright in here. Well, as we're getting older, it needs more light than it does now. But
solar heating, boy, it really
So.
What's interesting is we had that place up there, you can remember that, and they put Dane brought this down here and put all the machinery in here, and it functions just as efficiently as it did up there, and so forth. And basically, this PVL or ignition business now is rather unique and special in the industry. Otherwise, it couldn't exist, and so forth. But it has good prospects the way I see it now. I think you should go down through that section there and show them how you put that in. You explain it all.
Before, before we moved the shop, I came down here and actually took a measurement and did a fairly accurate layout of the floor so that I knew exactly what space I was working with. And then I had measurements of all of the machinery and then made scaled cutouts of everything. And I just started putting them on the drawing that I had to see if it would all fit in here and where it would fit and how it would fit. And there's only one piece of machinery that's not here. That was here when I first started working for Uncle Ted back in 1970. But it was a piece of machinery that I hadn't used in probably 25 years anyway, so I actually gave it to my son-in-law who works at another machine shop, and they still use it. So they put the machine to work. But the rest of the stuff is all in here in a position. And we've got the ignition part of the business over on one side of the shop, and we've got the machine shop and the offices on the other side. So it all fits. And there's not a whole lot of extra space to wander around in here, but there's enough room to do what we need to do.
Can you show us that one machine?
Sure. If you wander down this way, I can show you where that original machine was and is. This machine right here is a, as I said, it's a war surplus machine from World War II, and it says there's a plate on it right here that says property of the Defense Plant Corporation and instrumentality of the United States government. And as Jack said, he worked in front of this machine a lot. I worked at it a lot. Behind the machine, there's a feeder tube that feeds the machinery. And as I remember as a kid, and there was a window on that end of the building, and if the material was too long to fit here, it was actually outside the building down there, and it would come through the machine and cut the pieces off, little one by one by one. So, but this is where this machine sat when I first came here in 1970. But this milling machine that's right here, this was actually one of the newest pieces of machinery that when I first came to work for Uncle Ted in 1970, this was a brand new machine and still works today just as good as it did then. Don't have any problem with it. And, like I said, we packed everything in here at this point and everything works.
Today,
Well, if you go back to the Penton and the High Point era, in 1972, we started having problems with the motoplot ignition business, and the motoplot ignition was replacing the breaker point thing, and it was working great. But as motoplots production levels went up, of course, when you have huge production level increases, your quality control drops off, and so we started having problems with them. And I was working for the company at the time, and they decided to send me to Motoplot in Spain to learn about the motoplot ignitions. And one of the things that we learned was that you can't just test them with a meter, you had to test them on a dynamometer, and that's what all of this little alcove right here is the actual testing business, and that's where I got involved in the ignition business. And through that same era, we started adapting the things, the motoplot ignitions, not only to the Pentons and the Husqvarnas were using them, so we got to test them for all of those, but we also started putting them on the Japanese motorcycles, and that's where the business that we have today kind of got started. Besides supplying them for the Penton motorcycles and the Husqvarna motorcycles, and they were being put on Boltacos and Montesas and Osas and all the Spanish motorcycles, obviously. Then we started adapting them to the Japanese motorcycles, and as time went on, the business got to a point where it would support itself. And when the High Point business was sold to Malcolm Smith, I was taking care of the ignition business, and I wasn't ready to move to California. So we separated the ignition business off on its own and kind of put it in one corner of the building. And then, of course, the High Point trailer business was involved at that time at the same building, and we just kind of put it in one side. Well, then when the High Point trailer business and the building got sold, we moved it over to one side of KTM's building after KTM bought it, and just kept moving forward with more and more applications, and eventually we moved from, when Motoplot went out of business in 1993, we found another German company, which is the PVL company, and that we transferred a lot of the applications from the Motoplot over to the PVL thing. And a couple years ago, we found another German company, the MZB company, and we are doing applications for a whole bunch of different motorcycles using those products too. So, and then you said 1987 is when you came back
with
to
the company.
And she, Barbara started working in the office, and she's the administrative part of the company, and I'm the technical part of the company at this point. I get my hands dirty, and she makes sure that the funds come and go like they're supposed to. So, but as I said, now we take both the PVL and the MZB ignitions and apply them to as many different pieces of equipment as we can. The MZB company is learning that there's a great need for their product, and they're almost swamped, so we're actually having some troubles getting the applications that we need for those things because they can't keep up with the business. So I guess that's a good thing in the sense that there's always a future for it. There's always applications necessary. So.
Right. Tell us a few stories about working with these guys, Mr. Penton and Dane. Surely you have some interesting anecdotes or something you could comment on.
Well, when he mentions the technical aspect of this, I always try to screen every phone call that comes in, because if he's out here working on a machinery, rather than interrupt him, a lot of times I run into men don't want to listen to a woman as far as technical information. And occasionally I'll forward one over to him and say he doesn't want to listen to a woman. So it's interesting. I like to know the technical part a little bit.
Barbara has managed to pick up a lot of the technical side of it, and there's a lot of men out there that don't figure that a woman can understand some of this technical stuff. And most of the time when she forwards those calls to me, I will ask her, well, didn't Barbara tell you this and this and this, to make sure that he's, to try to shrink down his ego a little bit.
I'll listen to Dane, and it's like he'll tell him exactly the same thing I just got done telling the person, and then it's like, okay, fine.
Does your father come by
Every morning since we moved from KTM. You haven't been in my office yet, but we lost considerable amount of space in my office that I don't have room for his own desk yet. And so we've not gotten, I want to get a little board set up or shelf or something, and haven't gotten to that point yet. But yes, every morning he has his own chair, and he comes in every morning and sits down, and we chat and catch up, and so he's very much part of the business.
He's kind of our gopher too, because I have most of our product flies into a company near the Cleveland airport, and if rather than wait for them to deliver the shipment, I'll find out when it's going to be there, and then when he drops in here in the morning, I'll say, hey, can you go pick up the shipment? And he'll go down to do that. So he also, you know, if I have other errands that I need run here and there, he'll do that. So
Now, as the administrator, that falls on Barbara to direct Mr. Penton. So you are telling Mr. Penton, John Penton,
Never.
what to do.
No, no, no.
Asking him?
Yes, yeah, we ask him.
And is he cooperative?
Oh, yes, and he always relishes input and.
this time of year, it's always you got to get in between mowing this piece of grass and digging that ditch or something like that.
With the new
But-
farm, that's kept him pretty busy, and that's,
Now, as an old-fashioned kind of person, do you page him? Do you call him on his cell phone? How do you?
he's the cell phone guy now.
Yep.
Really?
He's
Oh,
learned
yeah.
that, yes.
So Mr. John Penton has come into the cell phone age.
Oh yeah.
You actually call him on his cell phone.
Oh, yes.
Yep, it's easier. That's the easiest way to get hold of him. Where before, you know, you'd have to wait till he dropped in. Well, now you can reach out with the cell phone and reel him in. So that works out pretty well.
You see, you entered the door, but here is a compact area of the machinery, you see, calling it a machine shop and so forth. As you can progress down through here and so forth, and now Dane can follow you and explain to you right when you arrive at the following the end of the machine shop.
I can explain to you kind of what we do with the various machinery in here. You know, the milling machine that I mentioned earlier is used for basically putting the mounting holes and so forth on the adapter plates. You know, you take the PVL ignition, like for instance this one right here. This is a really unique application right here. But we make these adapter plates, these aluminum plates, and we have to put the different mounting holes in them so that they'll go on the engine to put the ignition on them. This particular application right here happens to be a Greaves. And it's not something that you see very many of anymore. It's in vintage racing, but there's a Canadian fellow that sent me the bottom end of the engine and asked me to replace this particular item here that used a breaker point system, and he wants to put a PVL ignition on it. And I'm about 2/3 of the way done with the application right here. And so the milling machine is where we'll take, and I like the mounting holes, I put those on the milling machine. The holes that'll hold the stator plate on there will also be done on that machine. This lathe right here, I use it for rough boring rotors and doing some of the adapter plate turning, stuff like that. Then the lathe that's further up the aisle here, this is the one that I do most of the blanking. I take the raw plates like this that are sawed off of raw stock from the suppliers, and then turn them to the various shapes we need, and then from here, then of course they go to the milling machine. But this is the machine that I do all of the plate turning on.
This is all special work, hand work that is almost unheard of today. Everything is done on CNN machines and so forth. That's why it's a very unique little machine shop.
What makes the business work, I guess, is the fact that we do it on a small number basis. It's not the kind of a business where you can sell thousands and thousands of applications. But we're able, by having the machinery here and the skills that I've learned through the years to make these various adaptations, that we can do things in small numbers instead of huge numbers like what most of production is today. So that's how we were able to make it work. This machine right here is the machine that we take the rotors for the ignition systems, and I said I rough bore the rotors on the other machine over the larger lathe. This one here is what we do the finish boring on them and turn them to the different sizes, the different crankshafts. Now the plate machine, the plate turning machine, and this machine here are two that weren't in the shop back in the old days. Earlier in the conversations, we mentioned a Lodge and Shipley lathe. That lathe had an 8-foot bed on it, and the what they call the swing was 24 inches. It was 24 inches from the center of the lathe to the bed of the lathe. Well, we didn't need that piece of machinery, and I don't know, in the early to mid 70s, I think Uncle Ted got rid of it, and we started buying some of these smaller, more precision pieces of machinery. And that's one of these that's right here. So that's how they got us started.
It's not totally clean. That's right. I haven't spent too much time getting too organized. We were pretty busy with the move and
How recent have you moved?
pardon me.
How recent are you moving?
November we moved into here. And
We started in November.
well, I moved in
Yeah.
November, and Dane, it took him a good month and a half then to do the machinery, so, but we were actually operating shipping orders and things out of this building about mid-November, I think, wasn't it?
We start Thanksgiving.
That's right.
Over
yeah,
Thanksgiving,
over
so we just
Thanksgiving
actually moved the
weekend.
offices.
Yeah. And we downsized, and like I said, we didn't have room for a desk for Dad, and so this is Dad's chair. And he comes in here every morning, and that's where he sits and visits with me.
The trap door used to go right up from the basement up into the house. And as a kid, that was kind of a neat thing. You open the trap door and down through the trap door into the basement. Uncle Ike's house.
When I lived up there, the ladder was in a closet, little closet.
Yeah.
Come right down. When I wanted to make a phone call, I just come down. The phone was in there on the desk.
I wonder if that.
Up and down the ladder.
Ladder's not there anymore. They took
Oh,
it
is
down.
it?
Yeah.
Did it?
They took it down, yeah. Oh, you got it outside the. So.
You know, when I lived here, I bought my first new car, which was a '67 Mustang convertible. And I used to always park right there. And it was on midnights, and came home from work one day, went to sleep, got up, came down, and a big dent in my door. I mean, that deep. And I said, well, somebody did it in the parking lot at work last night. So I fretted about it for 2 days, you know. I said, boy, I'll never find out who hit my car. So one night I was just getting ready to get up and go get something to eat. Somebody, you there, Al? Yeah, it was Ted. He said, hey, you got a dent in your car? I said, yeah. He said, well, I did that the other night when I was getting ready to go somewhere. He was going out of state. He said, I didn't want to bother you. I knew you were sleeping. So he had insurance fix my car. Oh, man, it was a big one. He backed around and hit the truck. Lots of memories here.
I don't know what that.
It's today's Saturday, isn't it?
Yeah. Canadian arm got big.
Yeah, the Canadian arm got big, so big that your eyes would fathom. Anyone standing here could not believe what Kirsten's sister married a Canadian, and he started one of these stores, and there isn't anyone here standing could fathom what he has done in one of these stores, two of them today, one in London, Ontario, and then one up in Where are they? But it is they. One
Sarnia.
of the Sarnia, and one of the greatest. It's one of the greatest. But some of the ideas they brought down here, and use it in this depression. We're in a depressed area here, believe it or not, and they make this work. So, believe me.
One of the things while we're standing right here is we saw Dad's bell tower down there. Well, that tradition started with Grandma many years before I was around. And right there's the original bell that they all got started with.
That bell came out of the stone villa.
But there's always been a bell, and whether it's this one or not, there's always been a bell on the farm, and that was the way you got everybody to dinner on the farm, dating way, way back to the beginning.
So that was a school bell.
That's a school bell.
The bell rang at 5:45, and you better be at the house at 6 o'clock.
Sitting, hands washed.
You had 15 minutes, and we could be at the quarries, and you ran all the way home. And then he would show up,
and not necessarily at 6 o'clock.
At the table waiting for him, and about
7 kids
20
like
after
this.
6:30, he'd
Tongues
come
hanging
in.
out, huh?
Mom would be mad, and
And that bell came out of the stone villa down here, and mine came out of the Middle Ridge School up on Middle Ridge, where the workshop players are.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear this one ring.
I don't know if they ring that.
We'll get in trouble. I'm just kidding.
I don't know. Oh yeah, see, he's got a chain on it. Yeah, that ring. And incidentally, they have different tones. You could tell the difference in these two tones. Every bell. But those two bells have, you could tell, I don't care how far away you were, you could always tell those two bells.
And they have
You know
different
what we had
tones, so
for
you know who's
dinner
right.
bell on our farm? My sister hung a towel on the clothesline when that dinner was ready. And you better park that tractor or horse, whichever it was, and head to the house. It was the towel on the clothesline.
A towel?
Yeah.
I bet you were all messed up on
When
horse
you're
day,
going
weren't
over the
Yeah.
hill, how could you see the
Our
clothesline?
farm was pretty level unless it was very one end. But well, she'd only do it, but she knew where we could see it. That was all we had. So that's where they filmed the house. That door.
What do you think of this operation, Dane?
Well, it's different than orange, that's for sure.
Well, how? Oh, they're going in here.
Yeah.
They're
This-
going, I see.
What's going on right now with this market? It's
Yeah.
turning into a house basically. Uncle Bill's wife, oldest daughter, and her son or her husband are now operating the market, and they're building a home in the top of the market here. Back here, this is a geothermal heating system that they've put into the ground. They've done, I don't know, 100 feet down. They got, I think, 4 holes. They go 100 feet down with the tubes, and they tied them all together, and they run them into the barn right here, which is going to be their house upstairs. It's 2,600 square feet.
I saw them put that in. They put those things oil, 100 feet.
Is that right? Take a big auger
Yeah, they're it's not even big. It's only about that big.
and then drop a
They're
coil
two
right down
tubes. It's not even a coil. It's just straight down. 2 tubes in each hole that go straight down. Orange is like you're talking about, the big coil. He's got like 4 foot wide trenches that are like 8 feet in the ground, and that's how his is in.
How well has Orange system worked? Pretty good?
Yeah, pretty well. Yeah. You want to mention where the barn used to be over there too.
Oh yeah.
That was the cider operation.
What's all this, Dave?
It's a roller hockey. roller hockey. Kyle and that was where the cider operation was, and there was straw. We used to keep straw in there. We used to build forts in the barn in the straw, and the cider press was in there. We also, at one point, and I can't remember when exactly, there was a basketball court built upstairs in the barn in one end that we used to have played basketball up in there. So the barn was one of those old pressed tin siding barns. Looked like a stone, but it was actually just pressed tin on the outside. It was kind of interesting. Built on this whole. We need to ask JP about. This thing all started. The whole farm started with just a little roadside stand, and I'm sure there are still some pictures around someplace.
It was over there. Close to the house, close to the old house.
Yeah, there was just a roadside stand that they used to sell vegetables at. That's where the whole thing got started.
First thing I remember, I don't even think it had. It was just a stand with a little roof. There was no sides on it at all.
Nope. I can remember that vaguely.
If I remember right, it was kind of on an honesty basis. Most of the time, it wasn't anybody out there.
Yeah.
Just take something and put your money in. If I remember right. That was back, way before I even bought a motorcycle. I remember once here, we used to come up here and get stuff.
In Canada, you would see something that no one here could imagine.
To show you. I don't know, on my first trip here, the first time I come out, Mr. Penton and Jack, you remember this, up on the barn, the door now is covered up with siding, but the door was up in the center here, and that's where they stored the early Penton motorcycles in their crates. They had an elevator set up right here, and the elevator went up, and they would set the crates on there, and they would go up, and my job that day was to take the brochures, and each crate to come out of the truck, you'd fold it up and you'd drop it inside, and then the cardboard crate would go up, and they stored the bikes up there. It saddened me to see when they remodeled this, even though it's a good thing overall, but it saddened me because every time I would come to a POG meeting and come stop at the market, I'd look at that door, and I'd always remember that time coming out here. So all these buildings are tied into the motorcycles one way or another.
And that was where the cider operation was, and there was straw. We used to keep straw in there. We used to build forts in the barn in the straw, and the cider press was in there. We also, at one point, and I can't remember when exactly, there was a basketball court built upstairs in the barn in one end that we used to have played basketball up in there. So the barn was one of those old pressed tin siding barns. Looked like a stone, but it was actually just pressed tin on the outside. It was kind of interesting. Built on this whole. We need to ask JP about. This thing all started. The whole farm started with just a little roadside stand, and I'm sure there are still some pictures around someplace.
It was over there. Close to the house, close to the old house.
Yeah, there was just a roadside stand that they used to sell vegetables at. That's where the whole thing got started.
First thing I remember, I don't even think it had. It was just a stand with a little roof. There was no sides on it at all.
Nope. I can remember that vaguely.
If I remember right, it was kind of on an honesty basis. Most of the time, it wasn't anybody out there.
Yeah.
Just take something and put your money in. If I remember right. That was back, way before I even bought a motorcycle. I remember once here, we used to come up here and get stuff.
All his life spent right mainly in this one area here.
Now, Mr. Penton, Paul was telling us about how when you were involved in the Husqvarna business as well as the Penton motorcycles, that you had a facility, what was it, just up the street or in town, Paul, for training, and you conducted the training there?
Well, the R&D building.
R&D, we had a lot of other we had several other buildings in Lorraine, you see. One we called the R&D, the R&D building, and then we had the main building over 54,000 feet on West Erie Avenue and so forth. But those have all been sold and liquidated out.
Well, we moved from the barn down to, well, started in a Honda store. Basically the High Point Accessories business started in front of the Honda store.
That's right.
In the 60s, and then
that's
the motorcycle business actually started up here in the barn, the storage of the barn, and then the whole thing moved down to 19th Street, 19th and Elyria Avenue in Lorraine, and it quickly outgrew that building and it moved to Colorado Avenue across the river, and then when it outgrew Colorado Avenue, then it moved to West Erie.
It just
That was the old skating rink, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the old roller skating rink in Lorraine.
so. But it all started here. And remodeling things there. So that's the back of it.
It's got a wide lens.
We just kept it. I mean, for our privacy, the whole 9 yards.
Mr. Penton, tell us a little bit about, now you have the orchard over here as well.
Oh, this was used to be a peach orchard all the way across here, years ago. This whole land is sandy loam up here, and we had peach orchards all across here, apple orchards over across there, you see, and everything has changed over 80 years, you know.
Except for that oak tree.
That oak tree, that baby is mine.
So, Mr. Penton, you said 80 years. How long has the property been in the family?
Oh, the property's been in the family since 1914. Yeah. Now we're walking, I'll just keep talking, but my family is kind of unique, the history of it. My family was, the Penton family was one of the famous Penton families of Cleveland, and my father migrated from Detroit, and originally my father was on one street, and there was an alley, and on the other side of the alley Henry Ford and lived, and my father worked for the shipyard. He was a internal combustion engineer, and Henry Ford, he was a believed in automobiles and the ignition system, but my father used to do part-time. Henry Ford wanted to build his car. My father would take his parts down to his shipyard and have them built. But finally, he moved to Cleveland and owned the American Shipbuilding Company here in Cleveland. And his brother started Penton Publishing Company in Cleveland, and Cleveland was really a roaring town, let's say, and so forth. And then the Depression came. The only one that survived out of Depression was Rockefeller, who was located in Cleveland. And my father and his lost their holdings, and the shipbuilding company, it went down to here, and the Penton Publishing Company, Uncle Jack, it went down, and so forth. But that was the origin of my mother was born in a farm in western Ohio, an aggressive farm, German family. Her name was Musselman, and he took up 167 acres of wooded land and turned it all into farmland and had the most modern farm going. And when the Depression came along, he lost everything too. So that's how that all happened. And my father, before the Depression, way back in the turn of the centuries, when my mother and father met down in Ohio State, that was when Grandpa was a big shot, you know, wealthy, and Grandpa, my father was supposed to study engineering and so forth, and what he studied was horticulture. Ohio State, you know, it was a big horticulture state, so he studied horticulture. My grandfather was so angry about all of that, so he kicked him kind of out of the family, and Daddy taught horticulture in Indiana for 2 years, and then he married my mother, who he'd been in school with. And my grandfather says, "Okay, I'll tell you, I'll do one thing for you. I'll buy you this farm." And we were outcasts of the Pentons from then on, you know. And that's how this farm came to be. My grandfather was very wealthy, you know. My family was before the Depression, and then everything. It's what goes round and round. You know what I mean? But that's an interesting part about the origin of the family. That's how this farm came to be. You see, and this natural gas installation here was part of the farm, but I had to relinquish that. I didn't particularly like it, but eminent domain just says you're going to put it here, and it was put in for natural gas for the Lorraine utilities and so forth, and that's how that come to be. So here we are. Now we turn around and we look at the old High Point Racing bus, and this used to be, the front of it was a bus. We'll get farther along so you can see. And for years the kids used this to haul the racing teams, and we had another one, a Penton Cycle Liner we called it, and it's since been junked. But these go back to the days when we were really in the big time. The kids ran these things thousands of miles, and then we cut the back part of it off, and when I had High Point trailers, and we cut the back part of it off, and we hauled trailers with it, and then we'd put another trailer behind it and haul 2 trailers on there. And there was a time when I could haul 5 trailers, transport 5 trailers with it. But that's what's left of it. And it's very unique because the engine still runs in it. Put a couple batteries in it and it'll start right up. And these were old mail buses in Texas at one time.
They had down there in Texas, because it was such a big space, the post office had basically a route that things would run, you know, from place to place to place to place to place, and they had originally they had just like a post office that was on wheels, and it would run post office to post office to post office. I don't know,
and
whatever.
They would even sort mail from post office. There was a sorting table in it and everything.
The whole canceling, the canceling machines and everything else in them. So they were pretty interesting. They were heavy though. That's one thing. We learned that you couldn't load too much stuff in them because they were made for the federal government, so they were made to last and last and last and last. Well, they also made them real heavy, so if you put a lot of stuff in them, you'd be overweight, and we used to eat tires up like, oh boy. And the interesting thing is they'd go pretty fast too. Of course, the faster you went, the faster tires would get eaten off them too.
Oh, yeah.
Mr. Penton,
You got to tell the Minnesota story. I love that story.
You like that
Oh,
story?
God.
That
was
miserable. That was miserable story.
well, early on, the buses, when we first got these things, they were just empty open buses with a driver's seat on basically, and there was an evolution, but Doug was one of the first guys that hit the road with these things before we really got into the racing all over the country, and he was hauling the Husky guys around back in the days when the Trans Am and Inter Am guys and Edison brought the Swedes and the Europeans over here to race motocross.
Yeah, they were flatlanders. These buses were made for Texas. The gearing
weren't they?
Yeah, the gearing was high. They'd run 80, 85 mile an hour, and there used to be a panel, an inspection panel on the floor that you could lift off and get down to the engine and check the oil and stuff. Well, the faster you went, this thing wasn't anchored down, and the faster you went, the higher off the floor it'd float. So you could be, well, we put bunks inside. You could be laying in the bunk and look back in somebody else's driving, and you could tell about how fast they were going just by how high this panel was floating off of the floor. It was not Gunnar, one of the Husky crazies. I can't think of his name. Anyhow, he's driving, and I look, and this panel is way off the floor, and we're going downhill out west somewhere, and it must be doing 90 mile an hour. And I yelled at him for going so fast, and he goes, yeah, you. And he just pushes his foot farther down, that was one of the stories. And then we had a Trans Am in Missouri. It's around St. Louis, and it was down in a valley. And we went down in this valley and parked and had the races and everything, and it got time to leave. Well, you had about from here to that into this driveway, and it just went uphill. And this hill was so steep that I couldn't turn the corner and make it up the hill. And I thought, gee, I need to get a run. So we tore down the fencing of the motocross track so I could back up and get a run at this hill, and it still wouldn't make it up. So then I thought, well, reverse is lower than first, so I tried to back up the hill, and it still wouldn't go up the hill. And here we're sitting down there, and everybody's leaving, and luckily Suzuki had rented a 24-foot box van that was busted, and they had sent for a wrecker. So I see this nice big wrecker come down, and I ask the guy, I says, you think you can winch me up that hill? And he goes, sure. So he planted the wrecker on the top of this hill, and we run the cable down to the front of the bus, and naturally I couldn't help him because it was moving so slow. So I'm just sitting there watching this cable go bing, and the dust come out of it, and bing, and the dust come out of it. And it's like, just get me to the top of the hill. And he had to winch me up this whole hill, and then he charged me $25 or something like that. But yeah, they were made for the open road, and you could set the throttle, had a locking mechanism, so you set the throttle and change drivers. You just get out and steer with one hand while the other guy gets in behind you. You just go forever, and had about 1,000-mile range. You fill it up with fuel. You didn't have to stop for quite a while, and so it got to be a regular thing with everybody, Doug's driving, save your Gatorade bottles, And with the Husky guys, every year it was kind of a new group, and One year I took a little SL70 on the cycle liner for a pit bike, and Andy Robertson was from England, and he was a trials type guy, and we'd stop and bing, if the bike didn't come out the front door, it went out the back door, and he'd be riding around at these truck stops and everything, you know. Always had to wait for Randy. Yeah, it was quite interesting. Put on lots of miles, had lots of adventures. Jack and I had a real adventure. We're going up to Minneapolis to set up a dealer, and that was probably December, January.
Whatever it was the middle of the winter. And
it was cold. And we got up into Wisconsin going up the interstate, and there's no tracks in the snow. And we're just kind of plowing along through maybe foot deep snow, and all of a sudden there's some footprints in the snow, and it's like, holy cow. And you couldn't tell which direction the footprints were going. But there was footprints, and I said, "Oh, Jack, you know, we're trying to take our half right out of the middle of the 4-lane." So I just kind of moved over, come over a hill, and there's a road grader sitting there, you know, and just. I said, "Okay, that's it. Time to get off this road." So we pull into a truck stop at the next exit. Said, "Yeah, this is a good place." Had a restaurant and everything, and so we parked the cycle liner, and I set the brakes, and we had a little catalytic heater.
Little Coleman thing that didn't do much.
Yeah, right. And so we tried to lay in the bunks and go to sleep, and you know, you toss and turn, and you're freezing, and you got everything on in there. And I said, "Jack," he goes, "What?" I said, "You sleeping?" He goes, "No, I'm freezing." I said, "Okay, me too." So we go inside and we spend the rest of the night in this restaurant. Well, then the sun comes up and the state highway says the road's open again and everything. So we go out and try to move the bus, and it's froze. The brakes are froze, and it's 40 below zero with the wind factor. And so I thought, well, the darn, because they were hot and icy, they froze in the brake drum. So tried a little propane torch, and it was so cold that even the propane torch
We went that far. It
wasn't
like
any more than a cigarette lighter, you know. I said, this ain't gonna work. So luckily we had the settling outfit on board, and took the settling torch and crawled underneath and heated the brake drum, and bing, bing, they finally released. But we were gone.
The thing about that was I remember laying in the bunk, and we had like all our clothes on, everything we brought, you know, all our clothes on, and we had these wool blankets and everything. And you're just laying there, and you could just feel the cold come through all your clothes. You know, it's like there was nothing you could do about it.
Yeah.
Did you leave it running?
Oh yeah.
But I was gonna say you must have left it running because it never started again.
Never shut them off.
But
Yeah,
these things
we were
never
gone.
had any heaters that worked anyway. If it got cold, you froze. So I mean, it had no chance of putting any heat out into the cab area.
Yeah, keep in mind they were made for Texas. It doesn't get cold in Texas.
Yeah.
Well, I think the engine only ran at 100, 200 degrees anyway, so
Yeah.
no heat.
But it was like, I don't know how many days we were gone, 7, 8, 10, but
We never did shut it.
never shut it off. But the next night we found a motel and parked the bus in the parking lot, left it running, and that's why you had an outside lot. You didn't have to worry too much about somebody getting in and driving it away. But I didn't. Also, I found level spots to park, so I never reset the parking brake when I leave it set overnight.
The thing is 2 axles, and it's so long that it would go extremely straight no matter what. So I mean, we got so that there was a refrigerator in the back. You get up and walk back to the refrigerator if you're driving and get something to drink. You see the driver walk by, you go back to the front because it would go really straight and for a long time. I mean, you could drive for a long time and not even have to turn the steering wheel, but you would be playing cards with somebody there, and you'd see the driver walk by and leave. Look up.
Going to the refrigerator.
And we'd always do that to the new guy. You know, the new guy would say, "Okay, it's your turn to drive," and he'd be at the back of the bus somewhere, sitting there. You go, "It's your turn." You get up and you go sit next to him, and he's like, "Ah!" You know, all excited and stuff. I mean,
Manual gearbox too, right?
and it's a 5-speed, and it was a real odd gear ratio. The gear ratio between gears was not even like on a regular truck, so it would go into gear at different RPMs for each one, and it was something that you just had to learn how to do. there's nothing natural about shifting one of these old buses. And once you got the hang of it, you know, you could shift it all over, but you put the new guy in the drill. Everything had to do with screwing with the new guy, you know. But you put him in the driver's seat and they could never get the thing in gear, you know, when
That's
they were
why
driving.
you usually switch drivers when you're on a nice open road, and you just let them steer for a while.
Yeah.
You know, and then
Well, my wife has driven this thing for 6 hours and never shifted it.
Well, my wife drove it to, you know, we went to Unadilla one time, and she drove it for 4 or 5 hours across Pennsylvania. I'm sleeping in the bunk behind the. She says, "Hey, it's dark out." And I said, "Yeah, it's nighttime. Yeah, it's dark." She says, "No, it's dark out." And I rolled out of the bunk, and there was no lights. We're in the middle of the night, going across Wisconsin Interstate 80, and what had happened is there's a main fuse, and on that all the electrics went through this main fuse, and the ends corroded, and all the lights went out completely. We're going 60 miles an hour down Interstate 80 with absolutely no lights in the middle of the night. I said, "Stand on the brakes." And we stopped it right in the middle of the road, and there were some flares in there, and I quick jumped out and ran behind it and lit up a couple of flares. Good thing too, because the next vehicle that came along down the highway was a semi. Fortunately, this guy stopped and we figured out how to get it going again, but that was an exciting time that I had driving the bus.
That's one thing about these buses, was that there was virtually nobody that, it wasn't a standard vehicle and it didn't have a standard motor or any parts, so if you had any problems with them, you were kind of like, you had to figure out how to fix it yourself, more or less.
Like changing a water pump in Alabama.
That's what I was going to say. Is we got to Alabama and we're looking, the water pump went bad, and it would have been a standard scenario in any other vehicle but this one. And so we ended up, I think Dane found a machine shop, and they took and they built the shaft for the water pump or something. I mean, it got pretty hairy a few times.
we had a broken hose up in Oregon, hydraulic line, and it was like, now, where do you find one of these? And
Yeah.
so you just take it off and start hitting all the machine shops, auto parts, you know. Finally this guy said, "Oh yeah, you go over here and some little 2-bit store, the guy made up hoses, you know."
And the engine in the vehicle is in the middle of the vehicle, and it's a horizontal engine. The cylinders are horizontal, so it would be down below the floor. So everything you did was from the bottom up. There wasn't like a car where you could lean over the hood and work on it. It was like underneath. You're crawling underneath it.
And it literally has no brakes.
A lot of bad stories about no brakes. No disaster stories, but a lot of scary stories.
Scary stories.
Scary
Jack,
stories.
I heard a story about the fleet of Mavericks your father owned in one instance when you
Oh,
and
yeah,
Paul
we
were
hooked it
just
to
getting- Get in there, Paul, and tell us that range story.
Well, like they said, the bus would go about 1,000 miles, and my first trip with the team was to go to Fort Hood, Texas. Well, Penton at the time had several Mavericks that they used for general running all over the country and whenever needed, I guess.
Ford Maverick economy class.
Yeah, Ford Maverick. So Jack said to me, he says, "Come on," he says, "you and I'll jump in the Maverick," he says, and everybody else was in the bus. So it was all normal at first until all of a sudden the Maverick's low on fuel. And another part to go with this story is the cycle liner blew a little bit of smoke. You could definitely see where it was. So they had taken a pipe and ran a pipe that came up like a stack. It was about 3/4 of the way back, I would say, or almost at the tail back.
corner.
And it would come up, and then the black smoke would come out back there, the exhaust. So the Maverick's low on fuel, and we peeled off the interstate and fueled up. You jump back on the interstate, and it was raining like crazy, and Jack's driving, and this Maverick, I don't know, would do 85 or so, but we're flying down the interstate, and maybe like about 40 minutes later or so, you start to see a trail of black smoke up ahead, and he says, we're catching it, you know? And about the time you catch it and you get comfortable for a while, all of a sudden, oh, we're out of gas, and you peel back off the interstate. The whole way to Texas was that type of deal right
I
there.
forgot about that exhaust. That was another fun thing to do, is whoever followed you, you let up on the throttle pedal and just wait a couple of seconds and then smash it down again, and it would completely black out whatever's in back of you. So whenever we went anywhere, we had to do that to a few people.
Yeah. Besides getting stopped in Arizona, the cop comes up behind me and uh-oh. And it was registered as a motor home. Well, naturally, we had it full of motorcycles and everything. So when I stopped, I seen a guardrail, and I got right over to the guardrail where I couldn't open this door. And the cop comes to the driver's side, and he says, motorhome, huh? He said, I'd like to see inside of it. And I said, gee, well, you know, I can't get the door open. He goes, and he's, you know, looking through all the windows and trying to see what's inside. And he goes, you know, this thing is really smoking a little bit more than the average truck. I said, yeah, I know, sir. It needs injectors, and as soon as we get back to Ohio, it'll get new injectors and everything will be fine. So he let us go. But we never put new injectors in it. It just smoked and smoked and smoked.
You know, the thing about it is I mean, compared to today, the neat part about the buses was that they were 35 or 36 feet long, and that was back in the days of, they didn't even have like box vans. I mean, there was, you know, regular vans and cars with trailers and so on. So when we took the first one, we painted it green, and it looked real nice. But then a guy that worked for us was a painter, and he took and painted one of them white, and we put all of this, you know, glittery decals on it.
And it was in 1976. We had the, you know, bicentennial of the country, and we had an American flag scheme on the bus.
And it was red, white, and blue, and it was shiny. And when we showed up at a race with that thing, that's one of the things that I get feedback all the time. Was people said it was always so impressive when the Penton team showed up, because, you know, they showed up and they were in a big bus and it was a big team, and so it was kind of the predecessor. I mean, today I work for KTM and we show up in a semi, but
or two,
but this is so far back that it was kind of the predecessor to all of that. But we had some fun with that because it was such an impressive vehicle at the time that, you know, you put 5 or 6 teenage kids in it and you say go racing, and you can just imagine some of the fun that we had that didn't have anything to do with racing. You know, that was back in the days of cruising too, where you drive around these little towns we were in, and you know, they cruise back and forth like they would at
nice set of air horns too.
The drive-throughs from one Dairy Queen to the other and so on. Anyways, we had a whole lot of fun as kids in it, not as racers, but as kids, just packing in there. Have 5 or 6 people in there, head out to Oregon, or like you see, Texas or wherever, and we just had a whole lot of fun going places. That was part of the big adventure, was just being in the bus, just going in the bus. You know, oh boy, we get unsupervised.
Yeah. The bus wasn't, and when you look at it like what Jack just said, you know, it was a big show basically when you showed up. But it wasn't. That wasn't the idea. The idea was to be as inexpensive as possible, because you could put all of these people in this one
Dad
vehicle.
Had one mission. We had a completely different one.
So you know, we'd head out to the races. You know, you'd go from here, and it wasn't like you left 2 or 3 days early before the race. You'd leave the night before the race if it was a one-day drive. However many hours it took you to get to the race before, that's when you'd leave. Like if, you know, to the ISDE qualifiers, you'd check in on Friday. So, you know, we'd leave for, you know, Oregon was 2 days away, so we'd leave 2 days away, and we'd get there Friday morning, check in, and then Saturday.
Saved all those hotel rooms.
Because you guys were working all week, right up until the last minute when you had to leave, right?
Oh yeah.
We worked 8 to 5, all of us. We had regular.
5?
No, that's the official time. So if we had to work, here's the big factory riders, or what everybody thought was back then big factory riders, but you couldn't work on your bike until after working hours. So we'd work all evenings, every evening, you know, until 11 o'clock or something on the bikes.
That's why he said 8 to 5.
Well, at 5 o'clock you could actually.
Well, I took a break and went and had supper.
And then you could come back and work on your bike.
Till 8
you know?
or 10 or whatever.
Yeah, and it's forever and ever. But one thing it was is we managed ourselves. I mean, we were taught well enough, and Uncle Ted and those guys, that when we got there, I mean, our show was professional, it was organized. People looked up to what we did and how we got it done. We had a lot of fun, but it was still at the highest level of professionalism. When we went to Europe for the 6 days, and I got involved in that, of course, the big factories were involved. And we weren't lacking much of anything for organization back here. We had established a nice high level of operation, and it was still a good show. So we talk about a lot of the fun things that we did and all of that. But I think the people that I talked to, when we showed up, they knew that the factory team was there. You know, we conducted ourselves that way.
And I understand that you guys kind of really led the sport as far as providing support for the other Penton riders from your group.
That was hereditary.
That was just part of being a part of Penton.
Yeah, that.
If somebody had a problem, and we were always open, you know, to help.
Well, our name was on it, and it had to work, and it had to work for everybody, not just us. And everybody that joined our group had that same philosophy. I mean, you were part of the family at that point. I mean, that name, if anything wasn't right connected to it, it was your obligation to make it right, best you can. We had other little rules, unwritten rules, that helped to guide us. You know, we had motorcycles that we put a lot of time into getting just the way we wanted them, but they were always came out of a crate as a regular production bike. And we always had a rule that if somebody walked up to you and accused you of riding anything but a stock bike, you offered to sell it to them on the spot the way it is. And so no matter what you'd done to it, personalized it, whatever you did, that bike was always for sale. And it was always for sale at the price that they could buy a new bike. And that was a standing rule, because we never wanted to be accused of not using the products that we sold. And that's the way it was. That claiming rule, we sort of made that for ourselves many years ago, because we felt, you know, we really wanted those people to have.
Yeah, and then there was times when the people would order a bike and say, you know, could you bring this to Stone Mountain? But I want it broke in. You know, you can ride it at Stone Mountain, but I want it when you're done riding. So you take a bike, but you don't come back with a bike. And that happened to me personally probably at least a dozen times, maybe more than that. You know, you take a bike out of the box and you put your personal stuff in it, like Jack said, in preparation. Take it to an event, ride it once, and let's go back and start again. Yeah.
One of the situations we ran into quite often was we were the only one with a very large vehicle, and getting to and maneuvering around in some of the places we went to is difficult. I mean, like I say, today we have the same problem, but a little different. We go to the GNCCs with a bunch of semis. Well, they make a nice semi-parking area, and they make sure that the road coming in and out can accommodate that size of vehicle. But the one story that's probably the most frightening, I think, of all of them was, I don't know where we were going, but we were in Kentucky, I believe it was, and we decided we were going to take a shortcut to this one event. And we got off at Stinking Creek Road. And if you go down that freeway, that sign is still there, that exit's still there. And the road started out as asphalt and deteriorated down to the point where it was a dirt road, and some of the corners were so sharp that we had to back the bus up. And eventually we came to a large, it was a river. It wasn't flowing real deep, but it was a river, and we had to actually ford the river in the bus. And then we came to a bridge, and we all said, no way. It was a wooden bridge, and it had no sides on it, and we all got out, except I forget who drove.
I remember the story. I remember that, but I can't remember the whole scenario.
One person drove that bus over, because if that thing was going to go through the bridge and end up in the river...
Would that have been going to Hungry Creek?
I swear that's what it was.
The Hungry Creek 100, down in Tennessee, I think.
It's like one of those nightmares you have, you know, where it just won't end, you know.
No, I just remembered it. I remember this situation.
And then Frank Gallo he drove to Dalton to the Enduro on Stone Mountain on the way to Florida. And this was a little bit later, but he parked it, and it was the time it snowed, or it was all icy, and we rode, and it was very cold. And he went to leave, and the wheels had sunk in the mud and then froze, and he was froze to the ground. So yeah, there's a lot of unusual things that happen because it's such a big vehicle.
And getting to the races was always a project, because everybody had something to do to their bike, and you wanted to load by a certain time. Well, never. I always try to get mine done way early, so just in case. And a lot of times we had to put bikes on that weren't exactly done. So we figure, okay, he's got to do this or this, so we'll allow a couple extra hours when we get there. But after you come back from an event, and you've still got a dozen motorcycles or half a dozen motorcycles, muddy, dirty, filthy motorcycles in the back of the bus. They have to be unloaded, and they have to be washed, and they have to be put away. And sometimes that got to be a problem because people find lots of excuses not to be around when it comes time to unload the bus.
There was plenty of times too where somebody was actually working on it in the back of the bus.
Oh yeah, on the road.
On the way there, back there tinkering away.
One time with the Trans Am, I got pulled into a scale in Mississippi, and the guy says, "You're overloaded." I said, "By how much?" He goes, "Oh, about 800 pounds." I said, "Well, I had 6 or 8 Huskies in the back, 200 pounds apiece." I said, "Okay, I'll unload these and then go over the scale." And the guy goes, "No. He says, "You're overloaded, you got to pay a fine." I said, "Well, how about if I," because it's just into the state line. I said, "How about if I just turn around and go back out of the state?" He goes, you better not enter Mississippi anywhere because the word will be out." So I had to drive all the way up through Alabama and across Tennessee and then back around. And I think we were going to someplace like Houston or somewhere really stupid. But I didn't get fined, and all the motorcycles stayed on the bus. And the guy says, "Well, you can unload them and leave them here." I don't think so. But it was many adventures with this type of transportation.
On our longer trips, it was always interesting because, like going to Oregon is a 40-hour trip, and you'd have
48 to Portland.
48, but you'd have 6 guys in there, so you didn't have to really drive that much, I mean, you might only have to drive, 8 hours or something the whole time you're going, so you have these 2 days and you're only going to drive for 8 hours, and so we had to dream up things to keep us occupied. You could only sleep so much, even as a teenager. So we'd play cards and read books and do whatever it took, but it was fairly easy driving because you only have to drive a little bit for all of the driving that went on.
Back in those days, there was a certain beverage that was only sold on the western side of the Mississippi, and there was a group of people on the east side of the Mississippi that enjoyed that beverage.
Is that an adult beverage, Paul?
Yeah, it's an adult beverage, and I can remember we made a pit stop while we was on the west side of the Mississippi, and the back door went up, and case after case was piled in. I don't know how many cases there was, but we were doing a return run, making money on a return run on that trip. Another time too, when we went to Oregon, we got out to Trask, parked the bus, and went to a car dealership, and we had a person out there that was familiar with the people and knew the people, and we actually went in and bought a used car with the idea that if we brought it back and it was basically still in one piece before we went home, that the guy would buy it back for so much less. I forget what the deal was, but it made for a little bit of transportation while we were out in Oregon. We didn't have to use the bus, but there was always something exciting going on.
We still have a picture of the old white Cadillac.
The funny part about, we went to dinner one night, and there's probably only like 12 of us in this car, and we were coming back from dinner, and the bus was parked at a Lions Club fairgrounds, and they had some baseball fields there. Well, I'm in the back, and I'm squished in amongst a bunch of people, and it's dark, and Carl Crank was driving, and the next thing I know, I could just see, we were like doing circles in the ball field. He was giving us a little short track demonstration, in this here car, and all of a sudden all these extra light colors started to enter into it, and there was blue and red and all these colors, and here it was the local police, and I guess it looked like a scene out of Dukes of Hazzard basically, but fortunately the person that helped us get the car knew the police, and that situation went away, but there was always something going on.
And speaking of extra cars, one year the Citroen or Peugeot, one of the car companies gave the Swedes 2 cars to use so they didn't have to ride in the cycle line. And Heike McCullough, I know for sure, was driving one, and we were going to Toledo to one of the Trans Ams, and Heike says, "I don't know the way," and I said, "Well, you just follow me." So we're going down the turnpike, and I pull out, and I'm passing a car, and I look in the mirror, and here comes Heike in the medium, you know, driving alongside of me, you know, looking up, and it's like, Heike, you know, you got to stay behind. Well, those poor cars, by the time we got, they were sobs. That's what they were. Yeah. After 12 weeks, those cars were just junk. They were absolutely junk. We're going out west, and I know it's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I look in the mirror and I see these lights coming, and they're coming fast. And I hadn't seen Heike or the guys with the cars in over 2 days, I think. Pew, beep, beep, pew, you know, pew, beep, beep, pew. And I'm doing 80, and they're just, I don't know, but they always managed to be where we were supposed to be the next day or whenever, you know. It was pretty wild. Lots of fun.
Hey Jack, there was something I wanted to ask you about. Considering that the residences here and the residences here and the facilities are in more or less a suburban setting. Were you faced with a situation where, say, you were working on development or just service of a bike, getting ready for a race, and you had to test it? You're in the middle of a residential area. Where did you go? What did you do?
Well, yeah, where's Jeff when you have a good story? Well, originally we did our importing out of the back of this, the Honda store over here, and there's a field next door over here, and that was our little test track over here. And we were able to take the bikes out and do a couple laps up and down, but you could also take the bike over to the farm and ride around the back of the farm. Since there's a cemetery next door, they never complained, and the neighbors on the other side really didn't mind too much. But that brings up just one interesting story, is when they were building the interstate at the back of the farm, we were still back in the S90 days, you know, we were young kids. We go blasting up and down the new excavation back there before it was a road, and we always called them the highway guys would always try and catch us, and that never worked. But later on, when they finished the highway, I'd go up and down there on my race bike, you know, just to check jetting or whatever. And the chief of police here in Amherst was a rider. He rode hare scrambles with us. He was a very good friend of ours. And I was doing a big wheelie and blasting down the side of the freeway over there, and he was coming the other way. Obviously, he knew who I was. I mean, he knew me and I knew him. We looked at each other, and he was going that way at about 50, and I was going the other way at about 50. And I rode back, and I parked the bike, changed clothes, and I was out mowing the lawn, and he come driving by in his police car, just shaking his fist at me like this. You know? But we know all of the neighbors, and being rural like we are, they understood what we were doing, and we didn't abuse it. I mean, we didn't come out and do laps. We just test the bike. But we have the Metal Arcs racetrack is only about 5 or 6 minutes from here, so if you really had to do some real testing on something, we could get to an area that didn't disrupt the neighbors.
And it's a lot more urban today than it was 30 years ago, too.
Right.
You know, it's
in the mentality.
Well, we used to have an enduro, a 60-mile loop that left right from the Honda shop.
Wow.
Went across the street and worked our way behind the Ford plant all the way to the Vermilion River and down the Vermilion River to another little town and up the railroad tracks and back around. And it was a real enduro. I mean, it was a lot of railroad tracks, but there was a lot of trail, a lot of river bottom.
This area's, you know, I mean, it's suburban now, but even back then the mentality was considerably different too. I mean, in the 60s, you know, people weren't so uptight about everything, and like he said, they had an enduro, went right through Dad's yard.
Wow. If you were, at one time, had an FIM license, you couldn't compete in this country without an AMA license, and you couldn't, there was something about you couldn't get, an AMA card with their FIM. And so Lars came over here, and he was going to go to ride hare scrambles or something, And so he got an AMA card, and he was Larry Lawson. And I remember we went one time to a track up in near Toledo. There was a motorcycle club called Glass City Motorcycle Club. It was a 3 or 4 hour hare scramble. And Lars went along, and he was riding a Husky. And I can't think of there were 2 brothers that lived up around there who were the hot riders in the area. And I mean, nobody could touch him. No, it wasn't the Paisekis, it was another name. Anyways, they were the hot riders. And Lars lapped the guy 3 times. And when it got time to pass out the awards, they tried to give the overall trophy to one of these brothers. And the brother said, "Wait a minute. Come on, you guys, you know better than that. This guy here is the guy that won," and it was Lars. But it was Larry Lawson because he couldn't have an AMA license when his name was Lars Larson. So it was pretty funny. Bud Schroyer was the guy's name. So, and there was 2 brothers. I don't remember the other one's name, but Bud was the guy, and he was the fastest thing up there. But Lars lapped him 3 times in the event. So.
And Edison Dye had talked him into coming to America. And Edison Dye gave him a ticket to come into the Cleveland Airport. And first he was supposed to. Edison Dye never made any arrangements after that. And I suppose Edison Dye figured he'd come in and get in touch with me. But we didn't know anything about it. We got this phone call. We picked him up, and he stayed with us for a couple of months. And that in those days we took him to a hare scrambles in Mansfield and so forth, and he was here during the winter time, so he enjoyed the riding in the snow and so forth. And then we packed him up and shipped him out to California, but we had no inkling that he was coming. But he knew and was friends with us ever since.
Just
and
called
so
you from
forth.
the airport, huh?
But the only thing that I knew about him prior to that was at the 6 days at our meetings, he would come to our meetings in the evening. And one night we were there at the meetings, and it so happened that Dave Munganaz came in. When he took off his helmet, Lars Larson said, "Boy, I would like to have that helmet like that. Boy, the Americans had real neat helmets." And Dave gave Larson that helmet. So that's when I really knew who Lars Larson was, through that meeting, and that's all. I didn't know him prior to that until he showed up at the airport down here.
He became a fast friend of all of us too, because I know one year he went to the Corduroy with us too.
That's right.
And the guy had he had a good sense of humor, because I know when we were coming back through the border from Canada, you know, it's late Sunday night after the event's all over with, and we're coming through the border up around Buffalo, and we had 2 vans. Had the 2 Dodge vans. One was had the Penton, one was the Husky van, and we had the cycle liner too, because the bikes were all in the cycle liner, and I think there were 4 of us in the Husky van. 2 guys in the front seat, 1 guy on the back seat, and then Lars was sleeping in the back on the floor. And we pulled into the customs. There was this young lady in the customs booth there, and of course they got to ask, you know, where are you from and what are you up here for and all that stuff. And Lars, you know, I don't remember who was driving. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and you know, the driver told, well, we're Americans, you know, we were up in Canada for a race, you know, we just went for the weekend. Did you buy anything? No, we didn't buy anything. Well, is there anybody else? Yeah, we got 2 more people. Well, you have to wake them up because I gotta ask them too. Finally, the guy in the back seat got up and answered the questions, and then finally, she said, well, where's the 4th person? Well, he's sleeping in the back. Well, you gotta wake him up. So somebody woke Lars up, and he kind of stuck his head up over the seat, and she says, where are you from? And Lars went, Russia. And of course, this is back in the Cold War era yet.
This was Lars.
This is Lars, and he says, Russia, and her eyes got real big, and she said, well, did you spend any money? And he said, millions. And everybody, we're all kind of snickering and going, oh no. She said, well, you have to pull over to this building over here because we have to ask you some more questions. So we pulled up to the building and then went inside, and you know, then he said, well, he's from Sweden and blah blah, and he just blah. And it came, well, we got back outside and got in the van and went to start it up, and it wouldn't start. Well, it turns out the fan belt had broken or was loose or something, and the battery had gone down. So Lars decided he was going to get the lady that made us pull over to begin with to get us help. So he walked back over to her booth and said, hey, you made us pull over there and shut our vehicle off. Now you figure out how to get us going again. But that was the kind of thing that he was. He had a good sense of humor.
Donna, my wife, would tell you that when we were in Zakopane, Poland, coming back, we were in a Swedish van that was leased in Sweden. We came across the lake or the pond to Poland. Then we came from Poland down into out of Poland into Czechoslovakia, and then but when we went from Czechoslovakia, from Poland to Czechoslovakia, wasn't too bad, and so forth, and money and so forth. But when we got ready to go into Austria from Czechoslovakia, this is back in Redland, when they interrogated us and everything, and things got kind of ruffled up and so forth, and pretty soon, well, one guy was giving Larson a hard time and so forth, and about money and what the cost, and he took all of it, this Polish money and all the Czech money and everything, and threw it in the guy's face, and we took off. Don will tell you about that. That was Larson. Oh, yeah, that's when I got to, that was the second time I got to know him. And then he showed up at our airport down here. So, but that was Lars Larson. And so he's still in this country. He has dual citizenship now.
He goes home for 3 or 4 months every year, goes back to Sweden, so that he can, you know, maintain the citizenship.
Gunnar stayed with you for a short time at 1 year too, didn't he?
Oh yeah, Gunnar stayed.
Fall of 67.
They were staying at. I think that was when they were in the little house. I don't know. Gunnar Lindstrom stayed with us too.
Because I know when we was on strike, 67, I took him over to Manaway Corners to a hair scramble. And something happened to his Husky. He had to pull the flywheel, and I borrowed a flywheel puller from Eldon Barone, fixed his bike. During the race, he ran over Barone's foot and broke Barone's ankle. He felt so bad about that. I'll never forget that one.
Yeah, you could listen. There's stories that go on and on. Seems like it all started here. Yeah. Because the Husqvarna thing was started by Edison Dye, but he had no contact in the East and so forth. And the first thing that I knew there was a Husqvarna at all was John Veracio from down in New York. Ghost Motorcycle Sales gave me in 1964. The first year that they built the production Husqvarna 250 motocross. There were 100 in production. And years passed, and I kept the thing, and never did anything with it, and so forth. It just was a keepsake. And the years passed, and here about 10 years ago, no, it was about 8 years ago, Gunnar Lindström and a buddy from Sweden started to put together a history of Husqvarna motorcycles, and then they started the factory started a history, and they were looking for one of the first production of 100 complete production Husqvarnas, and there wasn't any, because all of those were sold and altered, raced, and this and that. So there just wasn't any. And there was one that came to the States, number 51. And the one that I had given to, not given, the loan to the AMA for their museum. Gunnar Lindström come in and found number 51. And so forth. And he said, by the factory like that, they'd give you 50 grand for that bike. And here Horatio had given it to me. And that goes way back, because the Husqvarna didn't come in until 67. Late 67 is when the Husqvarna came in. Early 67, Malcolm Smith and I got 2 of them. And Malcolm's got one and raced out there, and I got one, and the one that I got, I won Jack Pine on in 67. Those were the two first Husqvarnas that came into the States, except my original one from 1960.
Now those were 360s, though, weren't they?
No, I took
250s?
the 250 out and put a 360 in mine.
Oh, I knew it was 360.
And it wasn't. I later on found out it wouldn't have been necessary. I figured bigger, and that's why Farnstrom always figured bigger is better. Otherwise, he could have taken a Silver Arrow and just taken that, because the engine was a Silver Arrow 175. They made a 250 out of it and put it in a chromoly frame, and that was their first world motocross. All they had to do was reverse it and put a 125 in that same frame and the same everything. But I'm glad they didn't. I wouldn't have been building it.
You wouldn't have got started.
I wouldn't have got started. So that's it. That's a story in itself. There stories go way. You're talking back 30, 35 years.
We've been up on 40 years.
And that is something that always rests in my mind. This railroad here was started in 1899 and lasted 30 years, and that was the end of it.
Did it run from Amherst to Cleveland, or where?
It was the Green Line. It ran down to Penfield Junction, or Killerview. That was called Penfield Junction. And there it met the Green Line that ran to Elyria. You follow me?
Okay, Penfield Junction is Northridge and Broadway.
Northridge and Broadway.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
why it got that name, Penfield Junction.
Okay.
You see, and so forth. And it ran right through your standing. As a matter of fact, that fence is on the lot line of it. And this fence is on the other one. It was 40 feet wide. Yeah, there's a pin right here. Right here someplace. Right here's a pin. That was. There used to be a ditch right down through here, and that fence over there was the other. I think it was 40-foot right away, and This one went right down through here. I can't remember. And I can tell, I was too small, but if we wanted to go to Amherst, Mom would pack us some of little things up, and we'd get on that trolley. But Ike and Ted rode that trolley to Amherst when they closed the school down here. So that's part of the history of how things change and so forth. And now, to my knowledge around here, I'm the only one left that remembers even the cemetery being built over here, and so which was built in 29 and 30. And I can remember walking over there. It was an old peach orchard. Those lakes weren't there. They made the lakes and banked it up, and it was all sand. But I can remember running over there barefoot in the mud while they were working, and they had an old crane like this loading wagon dumps and hauling that. But I guess to my knowledge, what is around here, I'm the only living one now. My brothers would remember it much better, my sisters, but they wouldn't remember all the terrain. See, I caught muskrat. I run this thing when I was just 6, 7 years old, getting muskrats out of there and the ponds and everything. And so I'm so happy for my growing up here. You see, I could have grown up if there wouldn't have been the Depression. I'd have been some rich guy down in Cleveland or something, so forth. The way it came out, my mother said, "I'm going to educate us." After the Pentons abandoned us, she made up her mind that she was going to educate us, and so forth. And she did a good job of it, because she was a farm girl. She was a well-to-do German farm family from the West, and at those times, girls didn't go to school. But her father said, "We're going to ship you off to Paulding County to go to high school, and then you go." She came back, and the first 2 years before she came here, she taught in a log cabin school. And then Grandpa bought Pa this farm. Said, "There, you can go out there and screw around in the dirt." But it turns out that in those days, and it turned out then when the war came, farming, when Second World War, farming was premier. See, that's basically one of the industries. That's why we could win wars. And believe it or not, one of the major products was potatoes. And they used to, for the war, even put in barrels apples and ship those over. Early apples, we'd ship those in barrels in World War II even. You know, because Europe didn't have the food. You see, there was the problem. We could make the food, and we had the industry. And if you notice, every war that ever took place, it was always the people that could produce. You see? And basically now, that's what scares me. We don't have anything but domestic production. We're building houses, we're having a good time, etc., etc. All the great production is coming out of Europe. I mean, China and so forth. Look, we're fighting a war, and even the clothing that's being built for the war. Think of it. The olive drab and everything, built out of this country. How can we fight another war? We're fighting a different war. And so forth. And eventually it'll balance off. Eventually our money will deteriorate to where we'll probably have to go back to war. I don't know. We're a much different society now. we're not a loyal United States. When you see people carrying around with another flag in our United States, now they want to change our national anthem. We're basically not a united people anymore. You see? Think of it.
This is Ollie's famous bridge. He did a good job, didn't he?
I don't know what I was thinking about. I meant this. Yeah. It's right where the weather is good at all times. And I meant it to be down here.
Yeah. You'll never be around long enough to see the weather down the jet.
Oh no, I don't think
And neither will Barbara.
I made it so a 40-inch long lawnmower curve. That's right. But it's got a foundation. It's pinned into the foundation.
Did he draw up plans on this, or did he just build it?
I have two foundations to it, down 3 feet. Rods sticking out of it.
Okay, there's a big pile right at
Is
the
this-
house with letters still on it.
This is about.
It is amazing from the perspective of someone who was not there to put everything in perspective. I mean, that picture of Grant's on the brochure, and here he's just going up the river.
This is Barbara's sister Laura, and her brother Brad, and Barb named. They were Aunt Donna's kids, and Tom, Jack, and Jeff were Uncle John's kids, and then Timothy was both of their children. He was both Uncle John and Aunt Donna's son. So they had seven children, and Brad died as a child, I think, of spinal meningitis. But that's where the Hokenettle name came in, from Aunt Donna's first husband.
Having walked all of the Penton family property, Mr. Penton next loaded us into his personal vehicle for a tour of his hometown of Amherst, where he pointed out several buildings which at one time housed various Penton businesses.
The bar and another gas station down on the opposite end of the corner where the pizza shop is now? Townie used to work there?
That was the Sunoco gas station. Where Townie?
Well,
Yeah, didn't Townie work at the corner there
this is Route 254.
early on?
Yeah, at Sunoco gas
This is
station.
no
behind.
doubt, it just
You
runs
mean
It was behind the bar.
Yeah, behind the bar.
Where the pizza shop is
That's
now.
right.
Yeah, okay.
That
And then this goes straight into Amherst. In fact, if you stay on that road right there, it becomes Milan Avenue in Amherst, where the KTM is. If you go
And this
straight-
is North Ridge Road, and where these cars coming down here, this was never there. That was a gravel or mud lane or something.
It's still
It was a gravel lane.
still in the...
It's rough. What's the name of them people that has that fruit stand right up there?
Borman's.
Borman's. One time, they had Meadowlarks had their weekend. They had an enduro, a short, like 38 or 40 mile enduro. Saturday afternoon. It was probably the second one I ever rode. Yeah, it was. I had my NSU. And they was going to have a dance at night. So I lived on Stang Road. And for some reason I came this way instead of going that way. But anyhow, I was in a hurry because I wanted to go home, get cleaned up, get back for and eat, get back for the dance. And I was zipping her down through there on my NSU, and it had STS tires on it. And right at that fruit stand, this guy stops. And I don't know what he was going to do, but there was a car coming the other way. He stops, and I shot between them on my bike because it just started sprinkling. The road was wet, and I touched the brakes, and it just seemed to go
This is
faster.
the old road.
And and I shot right between them, and my handlebars just snipped the door.
When did they build that into a road over there?
When the state made it a 254, when they paved in front of the Honda store.
Okay.
Not that road, the other one.
Before that, it was the gravel.
Jack and I, for some reason, had to come back over, whether it was time for dinner or what the reason was. I'll never forget. I think he had a Honda at the time. What did he have, a 450 Honda, Dane, for a while or something? Was it
400.
400. And he stood that Honda up on the back wheel, down past it, through down that road, all the way down along that cemetery. I mean, he was like vertical all the way down. I couldn't believe it. I'm on my Penton, you know, we stuck a plate on my Penton. There he goes down that road.
Well, that wasn't his 400 doing that. You don't do that on a 400.
Well, John had a 450 Honda Twin. One of the first ones to come out, because I remember he took me for a ride on it down there by the, I don't know where the Honda shop was. Wasn't hardly anything down towards 58. And he, come on, let me take you a ride. He said, this is the most stable bike I ever rode. He winds it up. We're doing about 100 miles an hour. I'm sure it was 100. And he lets loose the handlebars and does this. He says, see how stable this is?
You know,
I'm just thinking, get a hold of them bars, man.
it won't be long. You'll be able to get a job standing by one of them signs all day, putting numbers up and down, up and down, up and
They'll
down.
soon be electronic. If they made any profit selling that stuff, they could be electronics in there.
The Giant Eagle grocery store down the streets.
That's really what enticed me to go buy a BSN.
Marathon station down at the corner of Cooper Foster.
It's a 45-inch Harley, 3-speed Army model.
It's one down on your far right there.
Right in the corner.
Thank you.
This was the Penton R&D building, where all the cement block is along the front, or a lot of it. Dane and Mr. Penton would know much more, but a lot of that was glass block.
Well, it was a car dealership at one time, and so it had windows. The whole front of it was windows.
One of those Gary brothers owned that, wasn't it?
Well, then after the car dealership, after the
It was a plumbing shop.
plumbing shop, but we were in here at one time. Let's say that. That was a big store. What was that thing?
No, it was Gaylord's.
Gaylord's.
Okay, that's right.
Before that, it was a Giant Tiger.
Giant Tiger, then Gaylord's department store.
We used to in the wintertime take our mini bikes across the street and play flat tracker around the parking lot.
Cycle liners used to be parked right over here a lot of times, and the tractors.
We bricked this in, didn't
Yep.
we?
Yep.
Yeah, we bricked it all in.
It was all windows. All of
Wasn't that one of the Gary brothers had a car lot there, or the car dealers? There was one on down Broadway there about 13th. It was Cy Gary.
Now get in the left lane.
We're going to go across that where them people drown. Go under the bridge right here.
We moved from one abandoned building to another, I guess.
This slag pile
But
that runs.
the problem was we should have.
57, past 57. Where 57 comes from.
But I will tell you what, this thing was totally booming.
Oh,
Just
boom, boom, boom.
you couldn't. You're right. You'd come down here on a Saturday night or something, you couldn't hardly walk on the sidewalks.
That's right, on Broadway from about the 16th clear to the Lake Road. It's just people galore.
We come back this way now.
We'll go across the go the other way.
The other bridge. This is where the people ground right this.
Is that right? Yeah.
Another guy drove into it, but he got out and got on top of his car. They said it was only like a few inches from the
Ted's
top.
accident was too.
But their work, they found out a lot of the drains.
This is the byproducts of part of the old steel mill, see?
And he was driving a Fiesta, and it hit that like that, and it slid across the road into a truck. I had a brother who was
the Henderson Bridge and
killed in an accident. He was badly injured in an accident right there at the intersection. And he had come across. He had stopped at the shop there after school, and then he came over here to McDonald's to get something to eat. And then he was coming back, and there was water running across the road. And he hit the water in his car and slid across the road in front of it and hit on that truck.
Oh, wow.
Died in September 1980. weeks after the accident.
Yeah, where you can see the bridge, it raises. See it going across it, way over. That one opens up in the middle, raises up. That's the ship's. When you go over and you hear that bell ring, you might as well figure 15 minutes minimum. Time it gets up, ship gets through.
I think this place you're going to, I was only in once or twice. This was before we had R&D.
This is after.
Oh.
Well, we moved from R&D, the motorcycle and the storage over to here.
Yeah.
We needed more space.
More space. That wasn't enough building over
Yeah,
there.
right there.
So we moved over here.
Exactly which
This is the one I think that you moved to was the skating rink.
I haven't.
Well,
This
that's
is
after
all
this.
new. I haven't been here. There used to.
That,
Oh, the
blue,
gas.
that building with the blue right there is it. That was a car dealership too.
This is where 611.
You weren't in here very long though, were you?
That's called
Not very long.
Because that
A couple of years. It was a couple of years, yeah.
Look, the guy got the smoker going over there.
Yep, doing a
What's that?
over on the right there, over in the parking lot.
Barbecue
Look at the old
room.
gas station type building, like the Art Deco type gas station building.
Yeah, there. That's right. They got a McDonald's moved down there.
There's a Wendy's on the corner now.
It's kind of tour for me.
Yeah, the building with the blue and white there is where we moved after the 19th Street place.
Yeah, we moved into here.
There weren't no the
Rabbit
doors weren't
Auto
on front.
Body.
The parts office was up here in the front, and the motorcycle warehousing was in the
And
back.
see
I
the
remember
McDonald's. They moved the McDonald's out of here.
Yeah.
That was after you left, John.
Was it?
They couldn't afford to pay the renter after you didn't have your
Maybe
store
that's
there,
right.
your, parts.
Because the R&D building, I remember there was offices in there. You still
Yeah.
had offices and stuff in that.
Yeah.
Not much
All we're
offices
doing right now, Ted's making a circle.
between the.
When we go
nice
out here
Corvette.
to Lake Road and go across that
Yeah.
bridge,
That's the
we'll
only
be right
one
back
buddy
on the
style.
road.
I like it up till the current one.
Yeah.
Like the
All
current.
this over in here where these new big apartments are used to be the shipyards.
Tell you, this thing has all changed to me.
Oh yeah.
I've been down here in
Mr.
years.
Penton, you don't come out this way?
No. What's that?
Used cars,
That's Pecor's
Wheels
car.
wheels and deals, huh?
Now,
That's that Pecor that was in jail.
Oh, is he the
He
guy?
was a city councilman.
Yeah, the councilman that got in trouble. What was that? He was in a ramp like this. When it got to the top, it picked it up and dumped it right into the ship's hold. When it set it back down, something give it a little push and it went
You say
off
the
other
R&D
end.
building, and I mean, certainly understand research and development, but just tell us a little bit what was going on in there. What were you all working on?
Ask Dane. He can do it.
Well,
better
that was where we moved the machine shop. 1971, later 71, after we moved after the motorcycle and parts business moved over to Colorado Avenue, which was the other side of the river. The service shop where they worked on the engines and the training and stuff, you still did the training stuff there. And then they moved all of the rest of it out, and then we moved the machine shop in there. We had the trucks that we used for hauling the bikes and stuff and the boots and everything. That's where we serviced all of the trucks. All the racing activities took place in that building. And we stayed there for many, many years. And then eventually, when they got the Colorado Avenue or the West Erie Avenue building outfitted for the service shop, they moved all that out here, and the race shop just stayed over there, and we kind of took care of that, and then pretty much the racing stayed over in that side of town.
so you did move the machine shop from here up to here?
No, the machine shop stayed there.
Yeah. Until it went down
Until it went to Milan Avenue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you owned that building till the.
Yeah. I don't remember. You remember when you sold that to Harry?
About 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Does he still own that? Still?
I think yeah. I think he does.
He's still doing his business, or
Yeah.
Red building is
retired?
part of the dang display.
Well, then the machine shop stuff. You did? Is that where you went down and worked on your stuff for Motoplat then? Down there?
Well, I was out of the machine shop for a while because when I was doing the ignition business, and I was out here.
Okay.
So the machine shop stayed there, and anything I needed to do machine work, I'd go over there and do it.
Okay, I follow you now. I can remember the prototype sitting in the hallway down here. I can remember, I'm almost positive now. And also, look, there's a High Point trailer even sitting down there.
Yeah.
And then the cutaway engine sat on a stand in there. And right in front of us is where we took our picture here for the 6-day team.
This was an old old skating
It
rink.
was right on that sidewalk down, if I'm not mistaken.
And that's a bit that thing built on the back. On the back is a
cooler.
Is a cooler for the beverage.
That's a beer trailer, a beer dispensing trailer. They bought 2 or 3 of them from us and turned them into beer dispensing trailers.
Then later on, we built this on.
That's a nice building, Mr. Penton.
This was built. This part over here was built for the truck shop to take care of the trucks, the semis.
Yeah, we were even in the semi business. Got real interesting.
What's this facility across the street?
That's the Elyria Waterworks. Water to the city of Elyria, city of Amherst, and the Erie Huron Rural Water Authority out where I live, way out that way.
And interesting enough, everything across the street was trailer courts.
Wow. Over there, that was all trailer parks.
Boy.
Yep.
It was.
Now it's all senior citizens.
You know, at one time, remember when that changed hands and name was Thornburg?
Yeah.
When it went from Thornburg, that was actually my 3rd cousin bought it.
Is that right?
His name was Keith Overfield.
We also made a stop at the Motorcycle Club grounds, which Mr. Penton has long been involved with, the Amherst Meadowlarks.
They gonna run tomorrow, Jack?
See, now there's the club grounds.
Motocross?
But before this road came through here,
Wasting their time watering the track.
they put the road. What are they having to run tomorrow?
Tomorrow's first race of the season.
Well, it sure looks different. That don't look near as steep as it used to.
It's because it ain't all ate
I
away.
came off that top.
You guys ran scrambles there, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's the hill you were telling me about.
I came off of the top and hit the bridge one time on my Honda when I was trying to beat them guys who was
Yeah,
running
I
in
go up here and turn
Polaris.
around.
That's the picture you
That's
showed
the
me. That picture.
That is a picture. Right
Oh,
there. There was a
God.
little wooden bridge there. Where that hump is now.
Yeah.
At one time we used to go back in here.
Down that before the highway was there.
Yeah, across the creek down there, a little corner. First year I rode out here, 58.
Something really funny happened when we were here racing horse trailers the last time. I can't remember what it was.
You say they're wasting their time watering it now, Dan?
Yeah, because the water all dries out before the, tomorrow.
Yeah, if this sun stays out like this, they can do
You
that
start
till
watering about 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
after sun doing it.
And the sun starts going down. And I've tried to tell them that, but they don't understand it.
Where's all that water coming from, Dave?
Pond down there,
The pond?
bottom of the hill, right where that crane stand.
Yeah. I didn't know if that was
We brought in one of them 2 grandstands.
We bought those, yeah.
First thing I would do when I was here, well, they painted the one side of it, didn't paint the other side.
What, the club?
No, that container there.
Oh,
Well, I can tell you.
watch the gravel piles.
Holy smokes.
They just put that down as yesterday or today.
Good many workers out there.
Yeah. You never get many workers.
How about the old, what's the other? Now, our question for you is, from your perspective as Mr. John Penton, tell us what you think of the Penton Owners Group.
The Penton Owners Group is unique. And the reason for this, or its origin, is the reverence that the Pentons have to the motorcycle. I sit here and look at all the Penton group around me and so forth, and they come from a distance to meetings and so forth, and it's because of the motorcycle, and I think of the Penton heritage and so forth, and so I think it's a great thing, and I am happy that they picked this up at this time, because I'm still alive. It's like Ed Youngblood mentioned, when I was reluctant to have my autobiography, he mentioned, you know, now's the time that you should let me write an autobiography of you, because you're here and you could bring back memories and so forth. That's the unique part about the Penton Owners Group, you see, is those people rode the motorcycles, they're here and so forth, and they have saved history and so forth. And so I'm really proud of the total operation and so forth. And that's how I feel about the Penton Owners Group.